Tonight, a small town scandal when a beloved minister is killed.
And his wife and children go missing, but for how long and why? 2020 starts right now.
Why do you think the public was captivated with this story?
It was something that was so totally unexpected.
Someone had broken into the home, killed Matthew with the gunshot, and then took Mary and the girls and left.
A church pastor is dead, and his family is missing at this hour.
When you add religion to murder and then sprinkle in abuse, everyone's in shock and no one knows who to believe.
This is pretty telling. The killer unplugged the phone.
Yes.
So no one could call anyone for help.
People were frantic, thinking that there may be a killer on the loose.
The most important thing to them right now is to find Mary Winkler and find the 3 girls.
So how does that missing wife and mother go from lost to found?
Ma'am, get out of the vehicle. Get your hands out of the vehicle now. Get out.
Winding up in a police investigation.
I have nerve now, and I have self-esteem, and so my ugly came out.
I guess my ugly came out. What does that mean?
We could not have fathomed what actually did come out, not in our wildest thoughts.
This is stuff that doesn't happen to church folks.
The ugly side came out. Somebody ended up shot dead.
It became one of the biggest, most talked about stories in the entire country. And it all started here in the heart of the Bible Belt, in this small church in the tiny town of Selmer, Tennessee. Matthew Winkler would preach to his congregation every Sunday morning here about right and wrong and about living your life in the service of God.
On March 22nd, 2006, everyone was gathering at the church, ready for the Wednesday night service.
Matthew Winkler was pretty new at being the new head preacher, so he certainly didn't miss any services.
It's unheard of for the preacher, his wife, and his daughters who are there every week, and they don't show up.
But even though they kept watching the door, waiting for him to come through it with apologies and messages of love for the congregation, it never happened.
Overcome with worry and concern, some of the members of the congregation take a 5-minute drive to the church parsonage behind me. It's where the minister, Matthew, his wife, and 3 children lived. Once inside, the church members make a shocking discovery.
We were knocking on the windows, knocking on the doors. At that point is when I felt that something was wrong because the key was on the inside of the door, the TV was on, and there was no answer.
At some point, they go inside the home, walk through, calling his name, calling Mary's name, calling for the girls.
We're yelling, "Is anyone in here? Can anybody hear us?"
They looked around, no Mary, no little girls. Everything looked normal, nothing looked out of place. But the master bedroom door was shut. They walked over and opened it, and all their nightmares were answered.
Saw Matthew laying there on his back. A foam was protruding from his mouth and nose. We knew pretty obviously that he was dead at that time. So we called 911, and then we all gathered in the living room and held hands and prayed for Mary and the children because we had assumed that they had been abducted.
Church members couldn't fathom who would kill their preacher. This was a man who, in fact, was considered religious royalty here in Tennessee, coming from a long line.
Mary was raised in a strict household in Knoxville, Tennessee. At South Doyle High School, she was known as a reserved student with a good sense of humor.
She didn't draw a lot of attention to herself. That's also true of many women in the Churches of Christ Church. They don't want to bring a lot of attention on themselves.
Mary was cute as a button. She was always ready with a smile and a touch on the hand. And she just was the perfect embodiment of a Church of Christ woman.
Mary and Matthew met at Freed-Hardeman College. It's a college affiliated with the Church of Christ. And Mary has said that initially they were just friends, but then they started dating, and apparently Matthew must have liked her because 3 months later he asked her to marry him.
Both Matthew and Mary dropped out of school because they couldn't afford it anymore, and then Matthew got work as a youth minister in McMinnville, Tennessee. How would you describe the Church of Christ to someone who's not familiar with it?
It's very conservative, a Bible-based church. We say we have no creed but the Bible.
They believe in the literal interpretation of the Bible. And there are scriptures in the Bible that says that a woman is subservient to the man. Board of elders, the preacher, all of those in the leadership positions are men.
Tell me about Matthew's temperament.
Gregarious, somebody who could go into a room of strangers and make friends within minutes.
Magnetic personality.
Magnetic personality.
Your impression of Mary?
Mary seemed like a frail and vulnerable woman. She had a downcast look. She would not make eye contact, and she was walking 3 or 4 steps behind Matthew.
Matthew had this feeling he couldn't measure up to his father. He bristled under just being a youth minister. He wanted to be the preacher of his own church.
It was in January of 2005 that Matthew and Mary Winkler moved here to the town of Selmer. Matthew had just landed his dream job, named the head pastor here at the Church of Christ. Pretty religious? I see a lot of churches here.
Yes, almost every corner you'll find a church.
True happiness is found in God's Word. True happiness is not only found in God's Word, it's found by living the way God says to live in that Word.
The Winklers found a wonderful church in Selmer, Tennessee, and the people of the community and congregation embraced them and welcomed them. It seemed like the perfect scenario. That is, until March 22nd of 2006, when that beloved young minister was found dead on the floor of his bedroom.
Was it a kidnapping and it just went wrong?
Someone definitely intended to kill Matthew Winkler.
In a small town, people were frantic, thinking there was a killer on the loose.
And where were Mary and the girls?
Had someone unknown come into the home, killed Matthew, and gone off in the family van with the 3 girls and Mary, holding them captive.
On March 21st, 2006, in the small town of Selmer, Tennessee, Matthew and Mary Winkler, along with their 3 little girls, settled in for a quiet evening at home. They order pizza and watch the animated movie Chicken Little.
The sky is falling! The sky is falling!
But somehow, this everyday peaceful family activity would turn into a gruesome crime scene with seemingly deadly intention.
Matthew Winkler was shot in the back with a 12-gauge shotgun. 12-gauge shotgun is either used to hunt or personal protection, and it's used to kill. My initial thought was someone definitely intended to kill Matthew Winkler.
Members of the 4th Street Church of Christ find their beloved minister, Matthew Winkler, dead in his home, just minutes away from the sanctuary. They immediately call the police. Where were you when you got the phone call?
I was at home, of course, in bed or getting ready to go to bed. Then I immediately started reaching out to the agents and the crime scene team to get them to start responding to this location.
When the police came into the house, they cleared all the church members out, but they interviewed them as well and started picking apart the scene, looking for anything that could give them information.
They would have started with the interior, taking photographs, taking measurements.
Nothing was out of place. It wasn't ransacked, looking for valuables. But what would stand out is when you got to the back bedroom.
There were blood stains on the pillows. There were blood stains on the floor.
Matthew was laying beside the bed, and that's where he was found.
But you think he was shot while he was still in bed?
Yes, and he would have rolled over.
Investigators were thinking of a lot of things that this scenario suggested.
You have someone fatally wounded. No one else is around. Is this some type of robbery that had turned into murder?
Was this a vendetta or was it a kidnapping? And it just went wrong.
At that point, you don't know?
You don't know. I mean, it's a mystery.
What do we have here?
This is actually the bed.
This is the
that
bed.
That would have been where he was sleeping.
Could have been shot from here or from here?
Well, probably from this side.
Right.
He was shot on the bed, so that tells you that the shooter had no confrontation with him. There was no defense that Matthew could have put up, being that he was shot in the back.
And this is the shotgun shell.
It's actually the round that killed him.
Over here, this is the bird shot.
That's some of the bird shot.
Recovered from his body.
Correct.
This is the actual shotgun.
Yes, sir.
Can you show it to us?
That's 12 gauge pump.
What kind of damage can it do? Close up.
Well, lots of damage.
A 12-gauge shotgun shooting birdshot, when it makes impact, it's going to explode with all of these pellets. And Matthew had somewhere over 70 pellets in his back.
And for investigators, each crime scene tells its own story. And this one would reveal a chilling detail. It seemed that the perpetrator wanted to seal Matthew's fate with absolute certainty.
They were very disturbed when they noticed the telephone clearly placed in a position that was out of Matthew's reach. And it was disconnected from the wall jack.
So the killer unplugged the phone.
Yes.
So no one could call anywhere for help.
That's what we believe. Even if he was able to survive or even live long enough to reach up and grab the receiver and hit zero, it wasn't going to work.
There is breaking news that we've been following all day out of Selmer, Tennessee. It is a case of tragedy in a small town. A church pastor is dead.
While investigators were combing through the crime scene, news of the death of the much-beloved preacher Matthew Winkler shook Selmer to its core.
And, you know, it's just shock. Everybody's just in shock about it.
This is the 4th Street Church of Christ here in Selmer, and all day long, church members have been coming and going. You can see it in their faces how distraught they are about the death of Pastor Matthew Winkler.
Who would have done something like this? Everybody loved him from what we understood.
People were frantic, thinking that there may be a killer somewhere in their community.
And do police have a motive they're working on? Any kind of theory here?
Now, they are telling us very, very little about this.
Matthew was often approached by people who had addiction problems or financial problems. What if Matthew turned one of those people away? What if they had come back in anger?
An Amber Alert is issued for 3 little girls.
Police need to find Mary Winkler, 1-year-old Brianna, 6-year-old Mary Alice, and 8-year-old Patricia.
They, along with their gray minivan, were missing. Were they in danger?
An Amber Alert is issued for 3 little girls. They disappeared from their home in Selmer, Tennessee. Their mother is missing as well. Church members found their father, Pastor Matthew Winkler, dead.
With a young minister found dead in his bedroom, the community of Selmer was on edge.
There was a possibility this could have been a burglary that turned into murder.
Who is here in our community would do that? You know, this person's loose. People were worried.
Take a look at the van the mother and the children may be in. It is a 2006 gray Toyota Sienna.
The most important thing to them right now is to find Mary Winkler and find the 3 girls.
Almost 24 hours after the discovery of Matthew's body, there's a sighting of a gray minivan matching the description of the Winklers' missing vehicle. It was spotted in the seaside community of Orange Beach, Alabama.
That shoreline is particularly spectacular. They call it the Gold Coast of Alabama.
1025. I was traveling westbound on the road directly behind us.
That's it. 10-4, that's the vehicle.
And this van pulled right out in front of me, a Toyota Sienna minivan, matching the description of the van we'd been looking for.
10-4, we're pulling in the parking lot. 10-33.
Knowing that there was a possibility that Mary and her girls had been kidnapped, they were extremely cautious approaching that vehicle. They had their guns out.
Ma'am, get out of the vehicle. Get your hands out of the vehicle now! Get out. Step out of the vehicle. Put the vehicle in park and step out.
There she was, Mary Winkler, in a pink jumpsuit, looking as innocent as anybody walking down the street could look.
With no supposed kidnapper behind the wheel.
Walk back! Walk back! Keep walking!
Mary Winkler goes from being a potential victim to a suspect in her husband's death.
She got out and she never asked why she was stopped, why there was officers pointing guns at her or anything. She made no really expression on her face, and she was detained.
Hey girl, how you doing?
After we detained her, we ran to the minivan to check the welfare of the children. They just kept repeating, what's going on, where's mommy going?
Did my mommy do anything?
Shortly after Mary's arrest, police search the minivan and they make a stunning discovery.
It was soon after Mary was apprehended by the Orange Beach Police Department. A shotgun was found in the minivan.
You've heard the term, you know, we found the smoking gun. Well, that's exactly what we thought. We had found the smoking gun, and it was just our job now to put the facts and the details together.
Back in 2006, Stan Stabler was a corporal with the Alabama Bureau of Investigation.
I received a call from Orange Beach Police Department that evening. They requested that I come to interview Mary Winkler.
It's March 23, it's about 9:55 p.m. We're at Orange Beach PD. I'm Stan Stabler with ABI.
I asked her about anyone else involved, you know, an affair.
Y'all didn't have any major problems going on?
No.
Anybody else involved with either party?
Oh, no.
She was not as emotional as a person should be if they learned about the murder of their spouse.
Just go step from step and tell me what happened.
I just can't.
Why can't you talk to us? Is it me?
No.
I mean...
No.
She was very strong-willed not to disclose a lot of details.
I want to hear your side.
I appreciate I feel like you have genuine concern, and I do appreciate you.
Tell me why a mother of 3, a wife of over 9 years, almost 10 years, what would make you do this? Why?
No comment.
It was a very, very strange interview.
Has he ever hurt you?
Not physically.
She said she did not want to talk about Matthew because she didn't, quote, want to smear him.
No matter what, in the end, I don't want him smeared.
All we are seeking the truth. And we're not here to smear anybody.
Corporal Stabler asks Mary about that shotgun that police suspect she used to kill her husband.
Did you load it?
I messed it up and then put it back.
Where was it?
We keep it in the top of the closet out of reach.
The truth started coming out. Mary admitted she was holding that gun. She didn't admit that she pulled the trigger. She said she didn't remember that.
How many times did you shoot? Just one time?
Surely not.
Huh?
Surely not.
How do you know you didn't shoot more than once?
I don't.
And then finally, after almost 2 hours of questioning, a possible motive.
I love you dearly. But gosh, he could just nail me in the ground. I have nerve now, and I have self-esteem. And so my ugly came out.
When the ugly side came out, somebody ended up shot dead.
For almost 2 hours, Corporal Stan Stabler prods Mary Winkler about her relationship with her late husband, Matthew.
Mary Winkler eventually, during that interview in Alabama, did tell investigators that he picked on her. What she was describing as someone who was abusive.
How would he run you down? Bad mouth?
Chewing on you, yeah.
Just fussing at you,
Just
nagging all the
mistakes.
time?
And some well-deserved, by all means.
I think it's over.
But gosh, I don't want to talk about that now. I love you dearly. But gosh, he could just nail me in the ground. Or I just took it like a mouse. Didn't think anything different. I never spoke up.
She told me he was a good man. He was a good father. He was a good husband. She said, you know, at times he would get mad. She related it to blood pressure problems.
But he was so good. He was so good, too. A lot of times he had high blood pressure, but he'd never go enough to the doctor to get medicine for it. There's no sense, you know, just say the lady was a moron, evil woman.
She said she had had thoughts in the past about killing him.
Yeah, I didn't just get up and say, hey, let's see how this thing works. I've been battling it not to do that for him, and I don't know why.
Was he chewing on you when it happened?
I don't even know.
Mary had said that she got a job. Then she said her self-esteem started coming out. And then she started speaking up about things she didn't like.
I have nerve now, and I have self-esteem. And so my ugly came out.
When the ugly side came out, somebody ended up shot dead. So that's what Mary's ugly side is. The side that shoots her husband in the back with a shotgun.
Mary waived her right to an extradition hearing and willingly went back to face justice in Tennessee.
While in Tennessee, investigators from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation take another statement from Mary, which she initials.
And this time, Mary drops a few bombshells about the morning Matthew was killed. While she never admits to pulling the trigger of the shotgun, Mary does tell TBI agents she heard a loud boom, wiped blood from Matthew's mouth, and told him she was sorry.
It became real obvious that there was only one thing for the police in Tennessee to do, and that was to charge her with murder.
The startling account of a pastor's wife accused of killing her husband becomes big national news.
This is Good Morning America.
That murder mystery that has stunned everyone. A popular minister in Tennessee gunned down in his home, and the confessed killer is his young wife. Why?
People were like, what? The preachers?
People were wondering what would cause them to have their ugly come out.
Knowing Mary the way I did, I knew that he had to do something to push her over.
Mary's sisters say they saw a change in Mary once she got married.
I don't remember hearing her laugh. She was not a happy person.
Mary's other sister, Amanda, and her father, Clark, say they saw bruises on Mary.
I didn't say anything because if I was to say who gave that to you and that would make her mad, I wouldn't see her again.
I saw terrible bruises, the heaviest of makeup covering facial bruises. So one day I confronted her and I said, Mary Carol, you are coming off as a very abused wife. And Mary Carol would hang her head and say, no, Dad, everything's all right, everything's all right. And several times I talked very seriously to her about leaving him, and she just did not want to. I feel so bad about this. I feel like I have a part in it. I should have talked more to Mary Carol.
There were people who said that they did see a short temper in Matthew. According to the neighbor, their dog had gotten into the Winkler yard, and Matthew yelled at the neighbor.
He said, keep the damn dogs out of our yard or we'll shoot them. He had a temper on him. I've never met a preacher like him.
This never rose where it was ever a volatile encounter with somebody. It was just being stern, like the dog, hey, please do this. I've warned you.
As investigators dig deep into the Winklers' lives, they come to believe that Matthew's killing may actually have been about money.
That's what was the root of the evil in this whole situation.
According to them, Mary was knee-deep in financial fraud, and investigators suspect that weighing heavily on her mind was an upcoming trip to the local bank.
The bankers set a meeting for Mary and Matthew to meet at the bank on March 22nd.
I think she was desperate and afraid.
Mrs. Winkler is set for arraignment before a McNairy County judge.
After Matthew's death, Mary appeared in a Selmer courtroom, trading in her Sunday best for an orange jumpsuit.
It was somewhat of a shocking vision because she just does not look like anyone who could do anything like shoot her husband.
State of Tennessee versus Mary Carol Winkler. You're charged under Tennessee Code with first-degree murder.
After pleading not guilty to first-degree murder, Mary is led away in shackles.
Outside of the courthouse, church members stood in solidarity with the preacher's wife.
We had a special prayer for her at church last night, and we forgave her.
It's in God's plan, but there has to be a reason, because if we can't believe that, we cannot go on.
Mary's supporters believe that her years of alleged abuse culminated in the accidental shooting death of her husband. But investigators say the real motive in this case was money.
Early on in the investigation, TBI was interviewing local banks, and they more or less came to the TBI and said, we got to tell you what's going on here.
Investigators have learned from bank officials that Mary was in over her head financially after they say she got caught up in a so-called lottery scam, which was sweeping the country.
A lottery scam is when you get email or even a letter that tells you that you have won a lottery.
Here's how it works. The scammer sends a counterfeit check for an initial payment worth thousands of dollars. Now, in return, you're supposed to send them money to cover the processing fees.
The scammers make money off what you send them. Meanwhile, all you get is a worthless check.
Mary had entered all sorts of things. So when she got this saying that she'd won $250,000, she believed him.
What do we have here?
These are bogus checks.
So Mary Winkler got these checks in the mail.
Yes.
And she thought, wow, $4,880, $4,900.
Yeah. You're going to receive lots more once you send us the money, but she did not send the money back. She kept all the money. Back in those days, if a person deposited a check or cashed a check, they would actually receive the complete amount of money because it immediately went into your bank account.
Back then, you just didn't have the automation like you have today. So it could take weeks for the checks to come back as counterfeit. So when that happened, the banks wanted their money back from Mary, over $16,000.
And that is when investigators allege Mary cooked up a scheme of her own to cover her losses.
She was actually writing checks for one bank to cover checks at another bank.
What investigators say Mary was doing is called check kiting, floating funds between banks, and that's where the kite comes in.
And in doing so, she knew that she didn't have the funds in that bank to cover the charges, and that is an illegal act.
It's easy to see how desperation can lead you down that path where you're trying to find a way out and you don't know what to do.
Was there any evidence that Matthew, her husband, the minister, was in on this or knew about it?
We have no evidence because he never went to the bank. He never had his name on anything. These other accounts was in her name, so he wouldn't have access to her accounts.
According to investigators, Mary went to great lengths to conceal her alleged financial crimes from Matthew. They say she opened up a personal account out of town, changed her mailing address to a P.O. box, and she even tried to remove Matthew's name from their bank account. But investigators say Mary's alleged financial scheme fell apart after one late deposit sent her bank account into a tailspin.
I think it got a little out of hand because she got at some point like $5,000 overdrawn, which is a really bad position to be in. $5,000 in 2006 on a small town pastor's pay and a substitute teacher. You might as well say $100,000.
Things came to a head on March 21st, 2006. That day, Mary Winkler was working as a substitute teacher here at Selmer Elementary School. She receives an urgent call from the bank asking her to come in the very next day to clear up her overdrawn account. And they tell her to bring her husband, Matthew, along.
In fact, in this statement to TBI, Mary admitted to having a heated discussion with Matthew about their finances the night before the shooting. She says, "I had gotten a call from the bank, and we were having troubles, mostly my fault, bad bookkeeping." And then she goes on to say that the two were upset with each other and that she got to a point and snapped.
Do you think this is why she killed him?
Oh, yes, that somebody's going to have to face the music, and it was going to come back on her.
There must have been a lot of pressure on Mary to keep that away from Matthew. It was going to be embarrassing for the Church of Christ congregation. It was going to speak very loudly that something's amiss in this family. It's a reflection of the church. It's a reflection of God.
Mary feeling?
Prosecutors might think this is an open and shut case, but as Mary's murder trial gets underway, no one could imagine the twists and turns to come.
Mary Winkler had what appeared to everyone a marriage made in heaven, but behind closed doors, it was a living hell.
Miss Winkler, if you'll come forward, please, ma'am.
And when the demure preacher's wife takes the stand, dark and lurid details would soon come to light.
Did it hurt you?
Yes, sir.
Oh my goodness gracious.
This is stuff that doesn't happen to church folks.
Preacher's wife does not wear this kind of shoe.
Had there been a quiet rage brewing?
We could not have fathomed what actually did come out, not in our wildest thoughts.
Spiritual leader of the community. And now he's got a hellacious shotgun wound in his back. And his wife wants you to believe that she was driven to it.
She certainly wasn't acting like someone who shot her husband in the back.
I don't know that anyone anywhere had any idea of what was to come in this trial.
So it got heated in the jury room.
How are you going to defend yourself? He threatened me with the shotgun many times, putting it in my face.
Mary Winkler appeared to have had a marriage made in heaven, but behind closed doors, it was a living hell.
When they brought out the shoe and the wig, there was a gasp in the courtroom.
Matthew wanted me to wear it to dress up.
Dress up for what purpose, Mary?
Sex.
Oh my God, wow.
But if you looked up spousal abuse in the dictionary, you're going to see Mary Winkler's picture looking back at you.
Was Mary Winkler a victim or a villain?
Will the real Mary Winkler please stand up?
A grand jury had indicted Mary Winkler on a first-degree murder charge for the killing of her preacher husband, Matthew Winkler. She pled not guilty and went back to McMinnville after her father posted her $750,000 bond. Mary's 3 girls continued living with Matthew's parents, whom they'd been with since Mary's arrest.
Everywhere, everyone was covering the story of Mary Winkler. When you put the story in a nutshell, this preacher's wife shoots her husband in the back while he's sleeping and then takes her daughters to the beach. That sounds outrageous, absolutely outrageous. How can you not follow that story?
Well, people were wondering what would bring someone to this breaking point. What would cause them to have their ugly come out? And I think that was the big question.
And the fact this happened in the heart of the South, in the Bible Belt, was like fascinating to people because it wasn't supposed to happen. These are supposed to be godly people. Well, you know, godly does not mean perfect. And Mary proved that very well.
So this is the cleaners where Mary worked.
Yes. We're at the dry cleaners, Dry Cleaning Express, where Mary worked during her bond supervision. I would have to come and check on her.
What were your impressions of her during that bond period?
She was just real quiet, reserved.
We all just really loved her, and, you know, we got to be good friends. And we picked up a lot of new customers from her church that has decided to do business here because they want to be supportive of Mary.
But one question dividing the people of the town following the case at the time, was Mary actually the quiet preacher's wife everyone thought they knew, or was there another side to her, like the one Libby St. John and her husband at the time saw one night at a restaurant in McMinnville?
Well, we had been in there sitting at the bar, and Mary came in, and she was chain smoking cigarettes and drinking. It just seemed like she was so carefree that evening that it just shocked me. I almost wanted to go over there and say, listen, this isn't a good idea for you to be doing this. The owner of that establishment said While she was out on bond, she'd been there to celebrate several different occasions and her birthday recently. And so she'd been there several times. It just wasn't a one-off. You don't usually see Church of Christ preachers' wives smoking. She certainly wasn't acting like someone who'd shot her husband in the back.
And your husband at the time starts taking pictures.
He took them with his cell phone. The pictures made quite a splash when they came out.
These cell phone pictures, first obtained by Action News 5, are the talk of this quiet town.
I remember the bar pictures, the very things that seemed completely out of character from what anybody'd seen.
She was not supposed to be drinking.
Well, I think that basically it was not excessive alcohol. I think that's what was on the bond.
But it didn't look good.
No, I'm sure it didn't look, no, it probably didn't look good. Didn't sit well with people.
The way this came to us, this was like walking into a Kafka novel. Nothing lines up with logic.
Her life was taking some strange turns that didn't make any sense.
Her outward appearance changed, her clothing changed. It was like someone flipped a switch.
And when she started kind of hanging out at night, there was a feeling that this was a little quick. Why are you doing this? Maybe were you that the whole time? And it just gave people pause.
Will the real Mary Winkler please stand up? Is she the quiet, docile minister's wife, or is she something quite different?
With the trial gearing up, everyone was about to hear a tale they never expected from the preacher's wife.
Yeah, I don't know that anyone in Selma, and few people anywhere, had any idea of what was to come in this trial.
Mary's murder trial began on April 9, 2007, with the prosecution pushing for a first-degree conviction. The case was one of the biggest things the small town of Selma, Tennessee has ever seen. The media put this tiny courthouse right in the middle of the public's attention.
Television stations from Nashville, from Memphis, some from Huntsville, Alabama, were there in the courthouse because this was such a big story.
What was interesting was Mary Winkler arriving with her attorneys, appearing about as meek as you could appear.
Inside, the courtroom was packed, and the crowd included members of both families.
You had Matthew Winkler's parents there. Mary Winkler's family was there, her father.
We may begin with opening statements. The state may proceed first.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Walt Freeland. I'm an assistant district attorney. My strategy, like in every case, is to put on all my facts, because facts are stubborn things. You have to set aside whatever you think might have happened and just listen to the facts. There is no good reason why Matthew Winkler was murdered by Mary Winkler.
The jurors are about to hear Mary's interrogation tape, where she says she snapped because of Matthew.
He would knock your self-esteem down?
No, just chewing whatever. And that's the problem. I have nerve now, and I have self-esteem. And so my ugly came out.
Just kind of got to a boiling point. Just boil over.
There's no sense, just say the lady was a moron, evil woman, and let's go on with it.
Prosecutors bring out that big, powerful shotgun that was used to kill Matthew. The point being to show the jurors that this could not have been an accident.
You couldn't just pick the gun up and pull the trigger unless it had been racked.
Could you prime it or pump it or whatever it takes to get it in a functioning position? Could you do that?
Yes, sir.
By racking the shotgun, it places a shotgun shell in the chamber so it can be fired. The fact that she did tells me she had already thought in her mind what it was going to be like to shoot that shotgun. All that leads me to believe premeditation.
But to rebut the prosecution's theory of premeditated murder, the defense will call their star witness.
The defense calls the defendant, Mary Carol Winkler.
The only person alive who knows exactly what happened the day Matthew was killed.
solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
The most important witness in this trial, the one that everyone anticipated, takes the stand. And she testifies to some pretty shocking stuff.
The jury has just heard audio of Mary Winkler's interrogation, where she seems to imply that she suddenly snapped because of her husband Matthew's treatment of her.
I have nerve now, and I have self-esteem. And so my ugly came out.
Prosecutors tell the jury that Mary's real motive for the killing had nothing to do with Matthew's treatment of her. Instead, they say that the motive was about that alleged financial fraud they claim she was knee-deep in.
This was a premeditated act because Mary Winkler was in control.
Although investigators believe that the money was the motive in this case, they never charged Mary with any financial crimes.
She was the one that handled the finances. The finances were in shambles.
A bank investigator testifies that Mary had allegedly been scamming banks out of thousands of dollars by writing checks to herself and then floating money from one account to another.
These deposits were drawn off of the same bank, First State Bank, and were deposited within days of each other into the ATM at Regions.
So this check from Mary Winkler to Mary Winkler for $2,000 was deposited into Mary Winkler personal account on March 20th, 2006.
Correct.
March 22nd, 2006, Mary Winkler and her husband Matthew were supposed to go to the bank and explain where the money came from, where the money went, and how they were going to pay it back.
The house of cards which she had set up was falling down. March 22nd was the day it ended up that he was shot.
The prosecution claimed that Mary killed her husband Matthew because of the deep financial hole that she had dug for herself. But when it was the defense's turn, they painted a very different picture of Mary, claiming she was the victim in this case and Matthew was the villain.
Mary Winkler appeared to have had a marriage made in heaven, but behind closed doors, it was a living hell. The proof will show that Mary was his whipping boy.
Part of the defense strategy was to put Matthew on trial. They put on the stand a church secretary who claimed she overheard some really harsh words coming from Matthew to Mary.
The tone, the sounds were of anger, berating.
What did you say to Matthew?
Those are things that a husband shouldn't say to a wife. You are to be a leader by example and not by force.
Another witness to take the stand was Mary's own sister, Tabitha. And she said Mary complained that Matthew tried to keep her away from her family and control her every move.
How would he act to her?
He pretty much dictated anything that she did. She wasn't allowed to make any decisions for herself. She would have to say, I have to check with Matt, and it was usually no.
There was testimony from the defense about how Matthew could act aggressively, but there was not a lot of information. And the jury may have thought, well, if he was this awful man, wouldn't more people have seen more?
Defense ready to call us next witness.
We are, Your Honor.
But the defense then called Mary herself, and she testified in explicit detail.
The defense calls the defendant, Mary Carol Winkler,
about exactly what she said happened behind closed doors.
Miss Winkler, if you'll come forward, please, ma'am.
As she took the stand, all eyes in the courtroom were riveted on Mary.
Mary Winkler was up there, appearing meeker than you would think anyone could. For much of the testimony, it appeared to be her head was down in shame.
Now remember, the state argued that Mary intentionally killed her husband to cover up a messy web of alleged fraudulent check kiting. But on the stand, Mary had a simple answer. Matthew made her do it.
Who directed those deposits?
Matthew told me where to put them, and I put them in the bank.
Mary also testified that Matthew knew that the banks were demanding answers over the financial issues with their accounts.
He was upset, and I just tried to continue encouraging him if he would please go in and do that.
Did he say he would?
He said he would, but he had been saying that for weeks.
Mary explained to the jury that she didn't stand up for herself because she was so afraid of Matthew's volatility, his temper.
How did he act when he yelled and screamed at you?
He flailed. He just was all over. He would just be furious. He went from certain threats to more serious threats.
Can you be specific to the jury about any threats?
He told me one time that he was going to cut the brake lines out of the van. He threatened me with the shotgun many times, putting it in my face. He told me if I ever talked back to him, that he would cut me into 1,000,000 pieces.
Dan and Diane Winkler sat through a trial where they heard some awful things about their son, and it had to be very difficult for them. And their faces were stoic, but you could also see how it was affecting them too.
When I asked her about abuse, I said, well, you know, did he physically abuse you? And she said, oh no. I believe her to this day that he never abused her.
There was no indication from any of the people interviewed that Mary had ever disclosed it to them as a friend, or it never came out about any physical abuse. She described Matthew as being a fine man, and there was never a hint of any abuse.
But it turns out that Mary's testimony about alleged abuse on the part of Matthew was just the tip of the iceberg. This case is moving in another direction.
The one question that nobody will forget is when Steve Faris handed her a bag.
What's in that sack, Mary? Put it up on the screen.
When she was testifying to all of this, oh my God, wow. This is amazing testimony. This is shocking testimony. Almost couldn't believe it.
On trial for the murder of her preacher husband, Matthew. Mary Winkler tells jurors that she was living in a marriage from hell.
I had asked Matthew to have a divorce, and he absolutely denied it. That would not be allowed.
That was not an option?
No, sir.
According to who?
Matthew.
Preachers can't get a divorce. People want to know, okay, how do you preach the things you preach, and you're divorced?
Mary's defense team would also expose what they said was another dark side of the Winklers' marriage. One that would take this trial into a surprisingly different arena.
What's in that sack, Mary?
Shoe and a wig.
Show me the shoe that's in there. Put it up on the side there. Is that the kind of shoe that you would wear to church?
No, sir.
Where'd you get that wig, Mary?
From Matthew.
Well, why was that shoe bought, Mary?
Matthew wanted me to wear it to dress up.
Dress up for what purpose, Mary?
Sex.
When they brought out the shoe and the wig and put those on the witness stand, there was a gasp in the courtroom. It was just a moment in this case, I think, that everything turned. And then hearing the preacher's wife accuse her dead husband of all of these things that were not allowed in the churches of Christ congregations. These were sins.
Mary testified that Matthew had porn up on a computer and wanted her to watch it.
What would occur after he'd ask you to look at the photographs?
Go have sex.
Did he ever ask you to engage in any type of sex that you felt was unnatural?
Yes, sir. He just wanted to have sex with my bottom.
Did it hurt you?
Yes, sir.
The people in the courtroom, when she was testifying to all of this, you could kind of see on their faces like, oh my God, wow, this is shocking testimony.
For the life of me, I have never understood how wearing platform shoes and a wig for your husband gives you the right to shoot him in the back with a shotgun.
While the details of the Winklers' sex life caused a huge buzz inside the courtroom, the questions at hand were why and how Matthew was shot to death. And for the very first time, people heard Mary talk about what she says happened that morning, describing how it all started with the cries of their baby daughter.
Matthew kicked me out of the bed. He just caught me somewhere in the low of my back and I was on the floor.
What happened next?
He walked out of the room and then I got up and went after him.
Mary said she then saw Matthew covering the baby's nose and mouth to keep her from crying, something that she said he had done before.
What was he doing?
Suffocating her. I said, could I please have her? He just threw his arms up and walked out and walked away from the crib.
Mary says she was so disturbed by this incident that she followed Matthew back to the bedroom and she wanted to confront him about it.
I just wanted to talk to Matthew.
What did you want to talk to him about?
I just wanted to stop being so mean.
Mary testified she was afraid to talk to her husband and then found herself holding Matthew's shotgun.
Do you remember ever having a gun, holding a gun?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember ever pointing a gun?
No, sir.
Did you pull the trigger?
No, sir.
Did you intentionally, purposefully kill your husband?
No, sir.
Did you love your husband?
Yes, sir.
You still love him?
Yes, sir.
Mary had been very vague and foggy about a gun going off, which is a classic defense statement. They use the passive voice. They don't say, I shot a gun. They say, a gun went off.
So what was it that led you into the position of accidentally shooting Matthew Winkler?
I just wanted to talk to him.
It wasn't an accident, was it?
Yes, sir.
You just wanted to talk to him and he wouldn't listen. So you shot him in the middle of the back while he was asleep. Now, has that memory come back to you, Ms. Winkler?
No, sir.
You recall telling Agent Carpenter you remember hearing a loud boom and remember thinking it wasn't as loud as I thought it would be.
I don't recall telling him that.
Do you remember today if you told Matthew that you were sorry and that you loved him?
Yes.
The defense called a licensed psychologist to the stand who had met with Mary several times, and she testified that the reason Mary might not be able to remember the details of the shooting was because she had been traumatized by Matthew's treatment of her.
It's my professional opinion that Mary does suffer from a post-traumatic stress disorder, and at the time that this occurred, she was in a dissociated episode where she was not able to think or plan the way she normally would be able to do.
After 10 days of evidence and testimony, it's time for closing arguments.
Unfortunately, Matthew Winkler couldn't practice what he was preaching. His problem was that of a bully. And what bullies do is they pick on people that are smaller than them. And I say to you that if you looked up spousal abuse in the dictionary, you're going to see Mary Winkler's picture looking back at you.
He was brutally, premeditatedly, and intentionally killed, shot in the middle of his back as he slept. He did not deserve to die. Justice demands one verdict, and that is guilty of murder in the first degree.
Now the jury has a big decision. Couldn't Mary have gotten out of a bad marriage some other way? Or is she just a cold-blooded killer? This very debate is going to spark some fireworks in that jury room.
So it got heated in the jury room?
It did, very much so. Oh, I was ready to come across that table and strangle her.
This morning, the jury is in deliberations, and Mary Winkler's fate hangs in the balance.
Emotions ran high as jurors seemed hopelessly divided on whether Matthew Winkler's death was murder or a fatal accident.
There was some that didn't feel like she should get anything. They were ready to let her walk. They felt like he deserved what he got. And then you had some that was like, yes, she was abused, but she did take a life, and that she should get something out of it.
We were very stressed during that time because we didn't know how to work it out.
So it got heated in the
It
jury
did,
room?
very much so.
I hear that you got frustrated because one of the jurors wouldn't even admit that she pulled the trigger.
Yes.
Refused to believe it.
And I looked at her and I was like, what? I was ready to come across that table and strangle her because I thought that was completely ridiculous.
The jury also had doubts about the prosecution's claim that Mary killed Matthew to avoid embarrassment over their alleged financial troubles.
People did not care about the money aspect of it. That was not what was on our minds.
Even though she was called by the bank to go see them the next day, the day he was shot?
No, at the very forefront was the abuse. It never wavered from the forefront of our thoughts.
The jurors could convict Mary of first-degree murder, second-degree murder, voluntary or involuntary manslaughter, and it's anyone's guess where they were going to go.
And now you are looking at a live picture inside the courtroom. There you see Matthew Winkler's family, and they're all waiting for the jury.
After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury had finally reached a verdict.
And members of the jury are expected to read that verdict coming up momentarily.
Miss Winkler, if you could please stand, ma'am.
And in true Mary Winkler fashion, she remained stoic as the verdict was read.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Mary C. Winkler, guilty of voluntary manslaughter.
There was a little bit of a gasp in the audience. I don't know that many people expected her to be convicted of anything less than first-degree murder.
With voluntary manslaughter, there is an intent to kill, but you were provoked by something.
There you see Mary Winkler's father, and he looks a little bit surprised there.
To the shock of Mary's supporters and the dismay of Matthew's, Mary will face just 3 to 6 years behind bars.
Would this jury have allowed Mary to walk free?
Part of them would have.
No comment.
They felt like she had already lived through prison with the life that she lived, and that it was justified and that she deserved to be free.
That's why you compromised and agreed to the lesser charge?
Yes, because I didn't want her to walk.
In Tennessee, 33-year-old Mary Winkler is awaiting sentencing after being found guilty of killing her preacher husband.
Mary, how you feeling?
On June 8, 2007, everyone gathered in the courtroom for Mary's sentencing as she pled for mercy.
I think of Matthew every day in the guild, and I'll always miss him and love him. There were bad times, but there were good times, and I wish I could have that good Matthew and that we could live together forever.
If I were Matthew's parents, that statement would have felt like a kick in the teeth. It was so disregarding of their feelings on facing this reality.
Matthew was a wonderful person. He loved life. He loved his family. He loved the Lord God with all of his heart and soul and mind. The monster that you have painted for the world to see, I don't think that monster existed. There's been no remorse from you. You've never told your girls you're sorry. Don't you think you at least owe them that? You've never told us you're sorry. I think you at least owe us that.
I can understand why a mother would more than ask that. And I would think a mother, as in Mary, would also want to apologize. The damage is done.
When the judge handed down the sentence, you could have heard a pin drop in that room.
The defendant is hereby sentenced to a term of 3 years. Her sentence is to be served in split confinement with 210 days of incarceration, with appropriate credit to be given.
With time served, Mary Winkler spent only 1 more week in jail in this very cell, and then 60 days in a mental health facility. To her supporters, it was a clear victory, but to others, it was nothing more than a slap on the wrist.
People were very shocked by that sentence and really couldn't believe it.
Matthew's parents had to feel betrayed by the system. They had to feel as if the jury had been played.
When you found out that she was going to get such a short sentence, what went through your mind?
I was heartbroken, actually. I felt like I had failed. I felt like I had failed, like I didn't do my part, that I had let her off.
I believe she should have served more time, but we did what we did because that was all we could do.
After the trial, the town of Selma remained divided over whether Mary really got justice. Meanwhile, for Mary, the saga isn't over.
After the sentencing, the public thought, okay, that's it. They've heard everything, but it was not.
She wasn't finished talking. She wanted to tell her story to everyone.
Hey.
Hi, Oprah.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Tell me why you wanted to have this conversation today.
After serving an additional 7 days in jail, Mary Winkler finished out the remainder of her sentence at an undisclosed mental health facility. And while there, she had a visitor on the weekends. Turns out, while she had been working at the dry cleaners, she struck up a relationship with her boss's brother. His name, Darryl Pillow.
I saw interest in Mary, and I thought Mary saw interest in me.
Darryl Pillow says sparks flew. It was instant attraction when he first met Mary at his brother's dry cleaners.
I was attracted to Mary. I mean, we do have a lot in common. You know, we laugh, we got the same hobbies. It felt very normal. It felt like it was meant to be, you know, that we was meant to be together. I know the first time that we sat on the couch and I hugged her and she said, oh, this is, you know, I missed this, you know, and that's what she needed. She needed somebody to hold her and hug her.
I remember hearing that she may have had a new acquaintance.
She was just a very sweet girl. I mean, it felt normal to be with Mary. Now, I never felt scared or threatened. Our relationship was on, we had an adult relationship.
Even though Mary was in a mental health facility, Darryl says he would come to visit her on weekends. The two were able to get closer, and he says they even got to the point where they discussed marriage.
We kind of joked around about it, you know, but it wasn't nothing serious. It's not like we set a date or, you know, maybe years down the road it may happen. I don't know. But it, you know, the option's there.
But soon after Mary was released from the facility, Darryl says she ended things with him.
She just said, Darryl, I've got to be single right now. And I said, that's fine. She needs to be focused on her children, and that's where she's at right now. She is focused on her children.
Since her arrest, even though she had visitation rights, Mary's 3 daughters had been living with Matthew's parents, Diane and Dan Winkler.
But once back in McMinnville and now living with friends, Mary is on a mission to get those 3 girls back.
Mary's got a long way to go, but she's on her road. She's on the way.
She's gonna make it. Since she's gotten back home, the Mary that we came to know and love, the grinning, the cutting up, you know, she's back.
Mary was determined to fight, and one way she could do that was by being the perfect parolee.
How do you think her time in jail impacted her life?
Well, she had time to think about what happened, I'm sure, and reflect on what she had done, and I'm sure she wanted to get out so she'd get back with her children as soon as possible. Her children were very important to her.
She lives and breathes every day for those girls. What she wants to do is get on with her life, let people leave her alone, get her girls back, and mourn her husband. That's her words.
Now back home, the once shy and demure former preacher's wife, who wanted a quiet life, raised eyebrows again after making one of her first stops the Oprah Winfrey Show, telling Oprah she hoped by speaking out, her story might help others.
An Oprah exclusive.
For the first time, Mary Winkler, the wife who killed her pastor husband.
Mary Winkler appeared on Oprah just as she appeared on the stand. Very soft-spoken, very meek and mild. And but I remember Oprah wasn't buying any of it. You know, Oprah didn't let her off the hook.
Was a shotgun in the baby's room?
No, we kept it in the closet. It's just, I can't, there's a lot of things that don't make sense to me.
Yeah. Well, imagine, it doesn't make sense to me either.
I know.
She kept prying and asking her and just telling her, okay, help me make sense of this.
The gun is aimed at him at some point. Do you remember that?
Well, no, because when I heard the boom, I just took out of there and took off running.
And then Mary explained to Oprah the importance of getting those girls back.
I'm their mother.
You killed their father.
I did not want any of this to happen.
Even though the girls had been living at Matthew's parents' home, the Winklers wanted to formalize it. They filed a lawsuit to adopt their granddaughters and terminate Mary's parental rights.
Mary Winkler looked happy and confident when she walked into the courthouse in Huntington for another showdown with her former in-laws over custody of her 3 daughters.
But there's still one more turn to come in Mary's roller coaster ride of a life.
Her life seems to be normal, except for one thing.
One more startling secret to reveal.
Something else had happened to Mary Winkler that was surprising, shocking.
Since her arrest, Mary Winkler has been locked in a custody battle with Matthew's parents. And finally, after months without her children, they reach an informal agreement out of court, giving Mary permission to take her 3 daughters back.
My girls are my girls, and I'm their mother, and we were just put back together, and we picked up where we were separated.
I know.
Come here, Emma.
After finally getting her children back, Mary Winkler sits down for one more exclusive interview with Janice Broach to reveal yet another setback in her life.
Tonight, Mary Winkler is back, and she has a secret.
I had found out that Mary had been diagnosed with MS, multiple sclerosis.
My right hand and my right foot were completely disabled, could not use. And so I was very fortunate that I have been able to come back to full capacity.
17 years after she shot her husband, Mary Winkler lives a quiet life. But to this day, there are still lingering questions in Selmer about whether justice was served in her case.
I believe that she actually got away with murder of her husband. Justice was not served, in my opinion.
Was Mary Winkler a victim or a villain?
Both.
Did Mary get away with murder?
Yes, she did.
She's going to have to answer for what she did. It's not up to me to forgive her. What she did is between her and Matthew and his family and God.
As for Matthew's parents, this tragedy that befell their son is still painfully close to their hearts.
His father, Dan, can be seen giving a sermon in this Palm Beach Lakes Church of Christ video, posted on YouTube just last month.
18 years ago, trauma knocked on the front door of our house, and we lost a son. I live with that emptiness all of the time, and it's been almost 2 decades. But I remember the sound of his voice. And every time we sit down at a Christmas table as a family, there's an empty place.
A father still grieving. Our own John Quinones reached out to Mary Winkler at her home, but she told him she didn't want to talk about what happened all those years ago.
That's right, David. She said she's moved on and she's busy taking care of her 3 daughters. Those daughters are now 18, 24, and 26. That's our program for tonight. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Deborah Roberts.
And I'm David Muir. From all of us here at 2020 and ABC News, good night.
Reconstructed the location data from Larry Sr.'s cellular phone on the night of the murder. The analysis placed his device in the immediate vicinity of Robbie's home, moving through the alleyways behind the property at the exact hour of the shooting. The records showed that after speaking with Becky on the phone to confirm Robbie's arrival, Larry powered off his device before executing the ambush. In the year 2022, Becky Dorr was put on trial for murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The prosecution presented a compelling case of circumstantial and digital evidence proving the meeting of the minds between the co-conspirators. The jury returned a verdict of guilty on all counts, and Becky was sentenced to 90 years in prison. Larry Richmond Sr. was subsequently tried and convicted of murder, receiving a sentence of life in prison without parole. For Robbie's children and his fellow firefighters, the convictions brought a long-awaited sense of peace, ensuring that the memory of a true hero would be honored, while those who sought to profit from his death would spend the remainder of their lives behind bars. The pond at the edge of Willard. The rural landscape of Huron County, Ohio, is characterized by vast farmland, quiet country roads, and close-knit railroad towns like Willard. It is a place where families stay for generations and life moves at a quiet, predictable pace. But in October of the year 2001, this peaceful community was gripped by a dark mystery that would remain unsolved for nearly a quarter of a century. Regina Rowe Hicks was a vibrant, independent young mother who was deeply loved by her family and friends. She was a woman of strong character, known for her love of country music and her devotion to her 4-year-old son, Montana. Regina had recently separated from her husband, Paul Hicks, and had filed for divorce, seeking a fresh start and a life of independence. With the financial proceeds from a recent insurance settlement following a fire at her home, Regina had purchased a distinctive white Camaro. The vehicle became a symbol of her newfound freedom as she began dating a new boyfriend, Mikey, and preparing for a future free from the controlling behavior of her estranged husband. On a crisp October evening, Regina was scheduled to pick up her son, Montana, from Paul, who who was staying at the home of his close friend, Steve Gates. Regina had planned to drop Montana off at her mother's house before enjoying a night out with her boyfriend. She called a mutual friend at approximately 8:00 in the evening, stating she was on her way to the property. She never arrived. When Regina failed to pick up her son, her family immediately knew that something was terribly wrong. She was a devoted mother who would never abandon her child. A massive search began, with family members and local authorities scouring the back roads for any sign of Regina or her white Camaro. For days after her disappearance, a local farmer noticed something unusual floating in the center of a deep farm pond on his property. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was the roof of a submerged vehicle. He immediately contacted the Huron County Sheriff's Office. Emergency responders and a dive team arrived at the scene. Divers entered the murky water, confirming that a white Camaro was resting on the bottom of the pond. Inside the vehicle, on the passenger side, they discovered the body of Regina Hicks. The discovery was devastating to her family, and the circumstances immediately raised suspicious questions. The vehicle was towed to a local police garage, where forensic investigators began a detailed examination of the interior. They noted several highly unusual details. Regina's body was positioned entirely on the passenger side, with her feet tucked beneath the console. The driver's seat was pushed all the way back, indicating that a much larger person had been driving the vehicle. The driver's side window was rolled down and the vehicle was stuck in second gear. The autopsy report revealed that Regina had suffered 3 distinct blunt force impacts to her scalp, which were sufficient to stun or incapacitate her but were not fatal. The forensic pathologist determined that Regina was alive but unconscious when the vehicle entered the water, as evidenced by the presence of pond water in her airway. She had drowned in the passenger seat of her own car. Paul Hicks was immediately identified as the prime suspect. The couple had been engaged in a highly contentious custody battle, and Paul was desperate to avoid paying child support. Furthermore, investigators discovered that shortly before Regina's disappearance, Paul's friend, Steve Gates, had called in a false drug tip to local police, attempting to have Regina arrested to damage her custody case. However, despite their strong suspicions, investigators lacked the physical or forensic evidence necessary to secure an indictment. There were no fingerprints, no DNA matches, and no eyewitnesses willing to speak. The case slowly grew cold, leaving Regina's family in a state of unresolved grief. Her mother, Lacella, spent the remainder of her life fighting for justice, putting up billboards and speaking to the media before passing away from cancer without ever learning the truth. 14 years later, in the year 2015, a massive house fire occurred in Goshen, Ohio, a suburb of Cincinnati. The home belonged to Paul Hicks, who had moved to the area and established a new life. Arson investigators quickly determined that the fire was incendiary, discovering multiple gas cans inside the residence. Paul immediately pointed the finger at his ex-girlfriend, Kelly, with whom he was engaged in a bitter custody battle over their young son. He provided police with surveillance footage from his home safe, which showed a woman with long, curly blonde hair who closely resembled Kelly setting the fire. However, a meticulous investigation by a forensic insurance analyst and local detectives exposed a mind-boggling hoax. Digital phone records revealed that Paul had utilized a sophisticated spoofing application to simulate harassing phone calls from Kelly's number on the night of the fire. Furthermore, investigators traced a series of unusual purchases made under a false name, discovering that Paul had ordered a custom-made, highly realistic silicone mask of Kelly's face from a specialty website, along with a blonde wig. Paul had hired an accomplice to wear the mask and wig, deliberately walking beneath his surveillance cameras to frame his innocent ex-girlfriend for arson. Although the criminal arson charges against Paul were eventually reduced to probation and financial restitution in a civil judgment, the exposure of his elaborate deception drew the attention of cold case investigators. In the year 2024, a popular true crime podcaster, Ashley Ford, began a detailed investigative series on the unsolved murder of Regina Hicks, renewing public interest and pressure on the authorities. Detectives from the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation took over the cold case, utilizing the pattern of control and deception exposed in the arson case to reevaluate the original suspects. They focused their efforts on Steve Gates, the loyal friend who had provided Paul with an alibi in 2001. Investigators approached Gates and his legal counsel, offering him full immunity in exchange for his complete and honest testimony. Fearing prosecution and burdened by decades of guilt, Steve Gates agreed to cooperate. He revealed that on the night of the murder, Regina had arrived at his property and engaged in a violent argument with Paul in the driveway. Gates admitted that he had retreated to his barn to avoid the conflict, but when he emerged, he discovered Regina's lifeless body slumped in the passenger seat of her Camaro. Gates confessed that Paul had threatened him, stating that he was now an accomplice. Gates followed Paul to the farm pond, watching as Paul drove the white Camaro into the deep water with Regina inside. Armed with this devastating eyewitness testimony, investigators arrested Paul Hicks in April of the year 2025, charging him with murder and kidnapping. The case proceeded to a highly publicized trial where the prosecution presented Steve Gates' testimony alongside the forensic evidence from the vehicle. The defense argued that the state's case relied entirely on the word of an admitted liar, but the jury was deeply moved by the overwhelming consistency of the narrative. After a brief deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. Paul Hicks was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. For Regina's surviving family, the verdict represented the ultimate triumph of justice over decades of calculated evil, ensuring that the memory of a loving mother would finally be honored in the light of truth. The anatomy of deception and the triumph of justice. Introduction: The psychology of the shadow. In the study of criminal psychology, one of the most profound truths is that the human mind is capable of harboring deep, unsuspected dualities. A community can exist in a state of absolute peace, surrounded by natural beauty and quiet routines, while beneath the surface, an individual quietly constructs a reality entirely disconnected from the moral expectations of society. To understand a crime, an investigator must look beyond the physical act itself and delve into the psychological landscape of the offender. Criminal acts are rarely spontaneous eruptions of madness. Rather, they are often the final, logical steps in a sequence of internal choices driven by unresolved conflicts, financial desperation, secret desires, or an insatiable need for control. This analytical study explores 4 distinct criminal chronicles spanning different regions of the United States of America. Each narrative demonstrates how the facade of respectability can mask a dark reality. More importantly, these accounts highlight the meticulous work of modern law enforcement, the evolution of forensic science, and the enduring resilience of the human spirit. Through the careful examination of behavioral anomalies, physical evidence, and advanced technological tools, investigators and communities have repeatedly proven that truth possesses an inherent light that eventually penetrates even the most carefully constructed shadows. Chapter 1: The Silence at Paradise Ranch. In the heart of California, halfway between the bustling metropolises of San Francisco and Los Angeles, lies the scenic region of Paso Robles, known historically as El Paso de Robles, or the Pass of the Oaks. This area is celebrated for its rolling hills, ancient oak trees, and sprawling vineyards. It is a place that many describe as a fairy tale, where people escape the pressures of urban life to seek solace in nature or celebrate major milestones, such as weddings, amidst the picturesque landscape. Yet down El Faro Road, in the middle of this serene setting, an event occurred in May of the year 2018 that would transform a beautiful vacation estate into a complex crime scene. This estate, named Paradise Ranch by its owner, was a beautiful 2-story Victorian home with wraparound porches, framed by a majestic willow tree. The property was owned by Nancy Woodrum, a 62-year-old resident who was deeply rooted in the local community. Nancy was a successful cosmetologist who operated a popular salon downtown called the Strand. She was known by her clients and neighbors as a woman of profound warmth, openness, and generosity. Following the death of her husband several years prior, Nancy lived alone in a small, cozy cottage on the ranch property, while renting out the larger main house to vacationers. Nancy was also a devout member of her faith, living her life with strong moral principles and sharing her beliefs with her daughter, Amanda. The mother and daughter shared not only a profession but a deep personal bond and a passion for horseback riding, which Nancy found deeply calming. On Friday, the 4th of May, a large group of over 20 wedding guests checked into Paradise Ranch to celebrate a wedding at a local winery. The bride had selected the property online, finding its rustic charm perfect for her. Bridesmaids and friends, Nancy welcomed the guests with her characteristic warmth, introducing herself and mentioning that she would be staying nearby on the property. The transition from a joyous celebration to a chilling mystery began on Saturday, the 5th of May. Amanda received a concerning telephone call, informing her that Nancy had uncharacteristically failed to appear for a scheduled Bible study. Alarmed by this sudden departure from her mother's strict routine, Amanda asked a neighbor to check on Nancy. The neighbor arrived at the cottage to find the front door wide open and the television blaring, yet there was no sign of Nancy. When Amanda and family members approached the cottage, they discovered a scene that immediately signaled a tragedy. Inside the residence, Nancy's purse, car keys, cellular phone, and electronic tablet were left untouched on a bench. Her 2 vehicles remained parked outside. However, there were significant blood stains on the floor, and a beige pillow on the bed bore a heavy concentration of blood. Splatters of blood were also visible on the headboard, a nearby cabinet, and the back wall. Amanda immediately contacted the 911 emergency system to report her mother missing. The first responding deputies from the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office, including Reserve Detective Clinton Cole, immediately recognized that they were dealing with a crime scene. The absence of forced entry suggested that the perpetrator had either entered through an unlocked door or was someone known to Nancy. Outside, in the dirt driveway, investigators observed 2 fresh tire tracks and scuffle marks, indicating a physical struggle had occurred before Nancy was taken against her will. The initial challenge for law enforcement was the sheer size of the suspect pool. More than 20 wedding guests were residing in the main house, immediately adjacent to Nancy's cottage. The remote nature of Paradise Ranch meant that anyone on the property was a potential person of interest. Investigators secured a search warrant for the entire estate, halting the wedding festivities and initiating intensive interviews with every guest. Among the guests, one individual drew particular scrutiny. He was a man who had not attended the rehearsal dinner on Friday night, remaining behind at the property. During subsequent interviews, his demeanor became increasingly defensive, and he expressed a reluctance to cooperate with the police, which investigators viewed as a significant behavioral red flag. Detectives traveled to his residence in Northern California for a 3rd round of questioning, eventually securing a voluntary deoxyribonucleic acid sample and reviewing photographs on his wife's phone that placed him at the rehearsal dinner, thereby clearing him of suspicion. Other potential avenues of investigation emerged. Nancy had recently decided to sell Paradise Ranch to devote her time fully to her religious ministry. To prepare the home for sale, she had hired several independent contractors, including painters, plumbers, and general contractors. Among them was Sean Bloom, a general contractor who had recently been terminated by Nancy following a heated dispute over the quality of his work and outstanding payments.
Sean
Bloom initially refused to provide a deoxyribonucleic acid sample without consulting his attorney, which temporarily heightened suspicion. However, he later cooperated fully, and his sample did not match the foreign profile found at the scene. Investigators also looked closely at Nancy's estranged son, Chad.
The
relationship between mother and son had been strained for several years due to personal differences. On the night of Nancy's disappearance, they had exchanged text messages, making him the last person to communicate with her.
Chad was
highly distrustful of law enforcement and refused to provide a biological sample. Investigators initiated surveillance, eventually recovering discarded beverage bottles from his truck after a traffic stop. The subsequent laboratory analysis cleared Chad of any involvement. Despite extensive ground searches of the surrounding foothills, riverbeds, and nearby roads, no trace of Nancy was found. However, a crucial piece of physical evidence was discovered by the California Highway Patrol approximately 6 miles from the ranch on La Ponza Road. Officers located a bundle of bedding, a pillow, a dress, a pair of shorts, and a shirt. Amanda confirmed these items belonged to her mother. The presence of blood on the bedding suggested Nancy had been wrapped in the sheets and transported while severely injured or deceased. As the weeks turned into months, the investigation stalled and public concern
grew.
It was at this critical juncture that the sheriff's office decided to utilize a novel digital investigative tool known as a Google geofence search warrant. This technology, which was virtually unprecedented in California at the time, allowed investigators to establish a virtual boundary around Paradise Ranch and request anonymized data from Google regarding any cellular devices that were active within that boundary during a specific time frame. The window of interest was narrowed significantly by a critical discovery in Nancy's telephone records. A 911 call had been attempted from her phone. At 12:17 in the morning on the night she vanished, but the call was disconnected after 0 seconds, indicating someone had abruptly ended the transmission. When the geofence data returned from Google, investigators carefully filtered out the devices belonging to the wedding guests. They discovered a single, unrecognized device that had pinged inside Nancy's studio cottage at 1:30, 3 and 1:52 in the morning. By obtaining a subsequent warrant for the subscriber information associated with that device, detectives revealed a name that changed the course of the investigation: Carlo Fuentes Flores. Carlo Fuentes Flores was a local painter who had worked on the decks of the main house at Paradise Ranch. He had been interviewed briefly early in the case, presenting himself as a polite, mild-mannered family man with no criminal record in the United States of America or Mexico. His employer of 20 years described him as highly professional and courteous. With this new digital evidence, investigators began a deep psychological and forensic evaluation of Carlo. A search of his Google search history revealed a stark contrast to his polite exterior. Carlo harbored a secret life, characterized by excessive drinking and specific, unusual sexual interests. His search history contained numerous queries for adult videos involving older women, as well as searches for escorts in various cities. Investigators noted that Nancy was approximately 15 to 20 years older than Carlo, suggesting a potential psychological motivation. To secure definitive proof, the Sheriff's Special Operations Unit placed Carlo under surveillance. Detectives followed him to a restaurant, where they recovered a plastic bottle he had discarded. The laboratory compared the deoxyribonucleic acid from the bottle to a partial bloody handprint found on the pillow in Nancy's cottage. It was an exact match. During a subsequent interrogation, detectives utilized a structured psychological approach. They began by establishing a rapport and asking Carlo about his work on the property, confirming his familiarity with the ranch and Nancy's cottage. When confronted with the reality of the forensic evidence, Carlo's confident demeanor collapsed. He initially attempted to minimize his actions, fabricating a story that he had accidentally struck Nancy with his vehicle while retrieving a ladder in the dark and had carried her inside to assist her. Detectives pressed further, pointing out the inconsistencies between his story and the blood spatter in the bedroom. Carlo ultimately confessed to the full scope of his actions. He admitted that he had entered the cottage with the intention of sexually assaulting Nancy, believing she had been flirting with him. When she previously offered him food, he admitted to raping her and subsequently suffocating her with a pillow to prevent her from identifying him to the police. In an unexpected turn during the interrogation, Carlo offered to guide detectives to the location where he had left Nancy's body. He led them on an hour-long drive east into the remote, arid landscape of the Carrizo Plain. After searching several locations, detectives discovered a small, circular pile of rocks that looked out of place. Beneath the rocks, they located Nancy's remains, which had been severely affected by wildlife. Following his confession, Carlo wrote a letter of apology to Nancy's family and his own, although his defense counsel later attempted to suppress the confession, arguing that the Miranda warnings should have been administered in Spanish. The court ruled that Carlo possessed an excellent command of English and had waived his rights voluntarily. In January of the year 2022, Carlo pleaded guilty to first-degree murder with special circumstances and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. While the family of Nancy Woodrum continues to carry the weight of her absence, her daughter Amanda preserves her memory by riding her mother's beloved horse, Montana, passing down a legacy of grace, resilience, and faith to her own daughter. Chapter 2: The Illusion of Grief in the Mountains. The second chronicle of deception unfolds in the majestic mountain community of Camas, Utah, located in Summit County, near the affluent resort town of Park City. In this beautiful landscape of snow-capped peaks and luxurious estates, Eric Richens, a 39-year-old stonemason and dedicated father of 3 young boys, built a highly successful business named C&E Masonry. Eric was an avid outdoorsman, known for his love of hunting, camping, and coaching his son's soccer teams. He was deeply committed to his family and his faith as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Eric was married to Corey Richens, a dynamic and ambitious woman who operated a real estate company called K. Richlands Realty, which specialized in acquiring, renovating, and flipping residential properties. To the outside world, the Richens family represented the ideal American success story: a beautiful marriage, 3 thriving children, and 2 prosperous businesses. However, in the early morning hours of March of the year 2022, this image of domestic harmony was shattered. At approximately 3 in the morning, Corey contacted 911 in a state of panic, reporting that her husband was cold to the touch and not breathing. Emergency responders arrived at the home to find Eric lying on his back on the bedroom floor. Despite intensive cardiopulmonary resuscitation efforts, he was pronounced deceased. In the immediate aftermath of the tragedy, Corey presented herself as a devastated, grieving widow. She explained to deputies that she and Eric had been celebrating a major business success earlier that evening, specifically the impending purchase of a massive, multi-million-dollar mansion in Midway, Utah, which she planned to renovate. She claimed they had shared a mixed drink in bed, after which she went to sleep in her son's bedroom to comfort him during a night terror. Upon returning to her husband's bed hours later, she found him unresponsive. Nights are often the most difficult times for those experiencing profound loss, and Corey appeared to channel her grief into a creative endeavor. She wrote and self-published a children's book titled Are You With Me?, designed to help her 3 young sons cope with the sudden absence of their father. The book, which featured a touching dedication to Eric and illustrations of the family, received positive attention. Corey appeared on local television and radio programs, offering comfort to other grieving families and discussing her personal journey of coping with widowhood. However, behind this public display of empathy, a scientific investigation was underway. The county coroner's office had conducted an autopsy, which revealed that Eric did not die of natural causes or a medical emergency such as an aneurysm. Instead, the toxicology report indicated that Eric's system contained a massive, lethal concentration of fentanyl, measuring 5 times the amount necessary to terminate a human life. Furthermore, the analysis determined that the substance was illicitly manufactured, street-grade fentanyl, rather than a medical-grade pharmaceutical. The discovery of a lethal overdose immediately transformed the medical inquiry into a homicide investigation. The Summit County Sheriff's Office, led by a dedicated team of detectives, began to examine the financial and marital dynamics of the Richens household. They quickly discovered a reality that was vastly different from the public image of success. Corey's real estate business, while active, was severely strained. She was carrying over $4 million in debt to various hard money lenders who charge high interest rates for short-term financing. In her desperation to fund her ambitious Midway Mansion project, Corey had secretly taken out a $250,000 line of credit against the family home, which was owned solely by Eric. When Eric discovered this unauthorized financial transaction in the year 2020, his trust in his wife was deeply fractured. He quietly consulted a divorce attorney and took steps to secure his assets. He established a private estate plan and trust, naming his sister Katie as the executor and designating his 3 sons as the sole beneficiaries, effectively removing Corey from his will. Although the couple remained together and attended marital counseling, the underlying financial tension persisted. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a history of suspicious illnesses experienced by Eric. In the year 2019, during a vacation to Greece, Eric became violently ill after consuming a beverage, later telling his sister Katie that he believed Corey had attempted to poison him. More recently, on Valentine's Day of the year 2022, Corey had purchased a breakfast sandwich for Eric. Immediately after taking a bite, Eric suffered a severe allergic reaction, requiring the use of his son's epinephrine auto-injector and a large dose of antihistamines. He texted a friend afterward, stating that he believed his wife had tried to poison him. The critical breakthrough in the case came when a private investigator, retained by the Richens family, analyzed Corey's telephone records. The records revealed that Corey was in frequent contact with a woman named Carmen Lauber, a cleaning lady with a history of narcotics offenses. Detectives executed a search warrant on Carmen's residence, uncovering illicit substances and securing her cooperation under an immunity agreement. Carmen testified that Corey had approached her on multiple occasions, requesting powerful pain medication for an investor who had suffered a back injury. Carmen admitted to procuring street-grade fentanyl pills for Corey in exchange for cash. The timing of these transactions aligned perfectly with Eric's sudden illnesses, including the Valentine's Day incident and his ultimate death. Furthermore, investigators discovered that Corey had been engaged in a long-term extramarital affair with a handyman named Josh Grossman. Text messages between the two revealed a deep emotional connection and a mutual desire to build a life together. In one particularly telling exchange, occurring less than 48 hours before Eric's death, Corey urged Josh to remain patient, promising that life would be different after Friday, the day Eric ultimately died. Following her arrest and incarceration, authorities uncovered further evidence of consciousness of guilt. During a search of Corey's jail cell, officers discovered a handwritten, four-page letter hidden in her bedding. The letter, which she addressed to her mother, instructed her to have her brother Ronnie fabricate testimony, claiming that Eric had obtained illicit substances from Mexico. During the trial in the year 2025, the prosecution presented a compelling case detailing Corey's financial desperation, her secret affair, and her meticulous efforts to procure lethal doses of fentanyl. The state called Carmen Lauber, Ali Stakings, and Josh Grossman to the stand. Josh Grossman delivered emotional testimony describing his relationship with Corey and recalling a chilling conversation after Eric's death, during which Corey asked him if he had ever killed anyone during his military service and how it felt. In an unexpected turn that stunned the courtroom, the defense rested its case. Without presenting any witnesses, believing the prosecution had failed to meet its burden of proof. However, after less than 3 hours of deliberation, the 8-member jury returned a unanimous verdict of guilty on all counts, including aggravated murder. Corey Richens, once celebrated as a compassionate author helping children navigate grief, was revealed to be the orchestrator of her husband's demise. Driven by financial greed and a desire to escape her marriage, she was sentenced to life in prison without parole, while her 3 sons were placed in the loving custody of Eric's family, ensuring they would grow up surrounded by the values their father held dear. Chapter 3: The Ambush on Oakley Street. The third chronicle takes us to the city of Evansville, Indiana, during a cold night in February of the year 2019. Evansville is a tight-knit community where first responders are held in the highest regard. Robbie Dorr, a 51-year-old veteran firefighter with 28 years of service on the force, was a beloved figure known for his bravery, his leadership, and his dedication to training younger recruits. Robbie was married to Becky Fox Dorr, a stay-at-home wife. Robbie worked multiple jobs, including a management position at a local restaurant, to provide a comfortable life for Becky and her children. Becky had been married 5 times previously, and her relationship with Robbie, while seemingly stable to some, was secretly fraught with financial and emotional tension. On the night of 26th of February, Robbie arrived home at his Oakley Street residence after completing a demanding 12-hour shift at the fire department. As he pulled into the driveway, multiple gunshots shattered the quiet evening. Neighbors immediately contacted 911 to report the sounds of gunfire. Shortly thereafter, Becky contacted emergency services, screaming that her husband had been shot and was lying on the ground. Emergency responders and police officers arrived to find Robbie suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. Despite desperate efforts to save his life, he succumbed to his injuries at the scene. The loss of a dedicated firefighter sent shockwaves through the community, and a solemn procession of fire trucks escorted his body to the coroner's office. Initially, investigators were faced with a complete lack of physical evidence. No shell casings were recovered from the driveway, and there were no immediate witnesses to the shooting. However, during the autopsy, the forensic pathologist recovered a unique combination of ammunition from Robbie's body, including jacketed projectiles, ball ammunition, and plastic shotgun wadding. This Specific mixture of projectiles pointed directly to a highly unique weapon, a Taurus Judge, a specialized revolver capable of firing both traditional handgun rounds and shotgun shells from the same cylinder. As detectives constructed their investigative whiteboard, they began to analyze the relationships surrounding Robbie. They quickly discovered that Becky's sister, Mandy, was living with a man named Larry Richmond Sr. Larry Sr. was a convicted felon who is currently on probation after serving 20 years in prison for a prior murder conviction. Further investigation revealed that Larry Sr.'s son, Larry Richmond Jr., worked at a local pawn shop from which a Taurus Judge revolver had recently been reported stolen. Investigators discovered a photograph on a cellular phone showing Larry Jr. posing with a stolen firearm, which he had subsequently passed to his father. During intensive interviews with family members and associates, detectives uncovered a complex web of deceit. Larry Sr.'s telephone records indicated that he was in frequent communication with Becky. In the months leading up to the murder, Robbie had expressed deep insecurities about his marriage, noting that Becky was secretive with her phone and frequently deleted her text messages. The most critical piece of evidence emerged from a detailed analysis of cellular phone records. Minutes before Robbie was gunned down in his driveway, a 4-minute and 18-second telephone call occurred between Becky and Larry Sr. Immediately after the call ended, Becky deleted the record from her phone, and Larry Sr. powered his device off. When confronted by detectives, Becky repeatedly denied the existence of the call, claiming she could not recall communicating with anyone prior to her husband's arrival. Her decision to lie about this critical communication provided investigators with clear evidence of a conspiracy. Furthermore, investigators obtained surveillance footage from a neighboring property showing Larry Sr. carrying a heavy box from his residence and burying it in the backyard near a fire pit. Police executed a search warrant on the property, digging up a buried plastic container that contained several firearms belonging to Larry Sr. A cellular phone belonging to Larry Sr. was also recovered, and although he refused to provide the passcode, forensic investigators with the high-tech crime unit spent several months utilizing advanced algorithmic software to crack the security encryption. The resulting location data placed Larry Sr.'s phone circling the Oakley Street area and waiting in the alley directly behind Robbie's home at the exact time of the shooting. The financial motive also became clear. On the day after Robbie's murder, Becky had visited the fire station to inquire about Robbie's pension and life insurance policies, expressing an immediate interest in the financial benefits of his death. In the year 2024, Becky Fox Dorr was brought to trial for murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The prosecution presented the deleted call log, the digital location data, and testimony from Larry Richmond Jr., who described witnessing his father and Becky sharing an intimate moment prior to the murder. Becky was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 90 years in prison. Larry Richmond Sr. was subsequently tried, convicted of murder, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Through meticulous digital forensics and unwavering dedication, the Evansville Police Department successfully secured justice for their fallen brother, ensuring that those who conspired to extinguish his light would spend the remainder of their lives in the shadows. Chapter for the Lakeshore Mirage and the Custom Mask. The final chronicle takes us to the rural, hard-working railroad town of Willard, Ohio, and the suburb of Goshen near Cincinnati. It is a story of a cold case that remained unsolved for over 2 decades, only to be unlocked by an extraordinary, highly bizarre modern crime. In October of the year 2001, Regina Roe Hicks, a vibrant young mother and a beloved member of her community, vanished without a trace. Regina had recently separated from her husband, Paul Hicks, following a series of domestic disputes and a fire at their home that had resulted in a $60,000 insurance settlement. Regina had utilized her portion of the funds to purchase a distinctive white Chevrolet Camaro, symbolizing her newfound independence. Regina was in the midst of a contentious custody battle over their 4-year-old son, Montana, and was fiercely resisting Paul's efforts to avoid child support payments. On the evening of her disappearance, she was scheduled to pick up her son from Paul at the residence of his best friend, Steve Gates. She never arrived, and her family immediately knew that she would never have willingly abandoned her child. 4 days later, a local farmer noticed an unusual object submerged in a deep pond on his property. Emergency responders pulled Regina's white Camaro from the water. Inside, on the passenger side floorboard, they discovered Regina's body. Her feet were tucked beneath the dashboard, and her upper torso was positioned in a manner that indicated she had been placed there by someone else. The autopsy revealed that Regina had suffered 3 blunt force blows to her scalp, which had incapacitated her, and that she was alive but unconscious when the vehicle was driven into the pond, as evidenced by water in her nasal cavity. Despite strong suspicions pointing toward Paul Hicks, who had presented a questionable alibi and claimed Regina was involved in drugs, there was no physical evidence or DNA to link him to the crime, and the case grew cold. 14 years later, in June of the year 2015, a massive structure fire occurred in the middle of the night in Goshen, Ohio. The home belonged to Paul Hicks, who had relocated to the area and worked as a railroad foreman. Paul claimed he was staying at a hotel in northern Ohio for work at the time of the fire. The home's surveillance system, which had survived the fire inside 2 fireproof gun safes, captured 2 individuals wearing protective white suits entering the residence and pouring gasoline before the building exploded. One of the individuals, who possessed long, curly blonde hair, looked directly into the camera. Paul Hicks immediately identified the female arsonist as his ex-girlfriend, Kelly, with whom he was engaged in a bitter child custody and support dispute. He claimed she had been harassing him, presenting phone records showing over 90 incoming calls from her number on the night of the fire. He also provided a prior video showing a woman with similar blonde hair damaging his hot tub. Based on this evidence, Kelly was arrested. However, an independent investigator representing the insurance company, Zachary McCune, began to uncover a series of astonishing anomalies. A detailed analysis of Kelly's actual telephone records revealed that she had not made those calls. Instead, investigators discovered that Paul had utilized a specialized digital service called Spoof Card to fake Kelly's number on his caller ID. Furthermore, investigators traced a series of unusual purchases made under the name of another associate of Paul. These included a specific blonde wig and a highly realistic, custom-made silicone face mask of Kelly's face, ordered from a specialty website called That's My Face. The photographs used to create the mask had been retrieved from Paul's social media accounts. Paul had meticulously planned the arson, dressing an accomplice in a custom mask and wig to frame his ex-girlfriend and secure a large insurance payout. While the civil courts ruled against Paul, forcing him to pay a $400,000 judgment to the insurance company, the bizarre details of the arson caught the attention of Ashley Ford, an investigative podcaster. Ashley launched a series of episodes dedicated to Regina's cold case, drawing renewed public attention and raising critical questions about the alibi of Paul's best friend, Steve Gates. Faced with the pressure of the renewed investigation and the threat of criminal exposure, Steve Gates finally broke his 24-year silence. In exchange for an immunity agreement, Steve confessed that he had witnessed Paul Hicks murder Regina in his driveway following a heated argument. He admitted that Paul had forced him to help transport Regina's body and her Camaro to the pond, where Paul drove the vehicle into the water before escaping. In April of the year 2025, Paul Hicks was arrested and indicted for the murder and kidnapping of Regina Rowe Hicks. A jury found him guilty after a brief deliberation, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Kelly was fully exonerated, and Regina's son, Montana, who had grown up in the shadow of his mother's unresolved death, finally received the answers he had sought for. A quarter of a century. Conclusion: the enduring light of justice. These four narratives, though distinct in their geography and specific circumstances, share a profound common thread. They demonstrate that while the human capacity for deception, greed, and cruelty can create temporary shadows, the collective commitment to truth, science, and empathy is an unstoppable force. From the rolling vineyards of Paso Robles to the snowy peaks of Utah, the quiet streets of Evansville, and the rural ponds of Ohio, justice was ultimately served. The memory of the victims, Nancy Woodrum, Eric Richens, Robbie Dorr, and Regina Rowe Hicks, is preserved not by the tragedies that took their lives, but by the love they shared with their families, the bravery with which they lived, and the enduring truth that eventually prevailed. The illusion of the perfect plan, a psychological analysis of hubris, deception, and justice. The human mind is a landscape of remarkable complexity, capable of profound empathy, creative brilliance, and quiet devotion. Yet within that same landscape lies the potential for a dark, calculated arrogance. In the realm of criminal psychology, there exists a recurring phenomenon known as the illusion of the perfect plan. It is a state of cognitive distortion wherein a perpetrator convinces themselves that they can outsmart the collective wisdom of forensic science, the relentless dedication of law enforcement, and the intuitive vigilance of a community. They believe they can construct a narrative so seamless that the truth will remain forever buried. But crime, by its very nature, is an interruption of the natural order. It leaves behind psychological tells, digital breadcrumbs, and physical anomalies. Behind every supposedly flawless scheme lies a trail of hubris. This analysis explores 4 distinct cases where individuals sought to rewrite reality only to find that the truth is an unyielding force. Through these narratives, we examine not only the mechanics of the crimes and the sophisticated investigative techniques used to solve them, but also the enduring power of human empathy, the resilience of families, and the ultimate triumph of justice over deception. Chapter 1: The Silence of the Oaks. The central coast of California holds a quiet, almost fairy tale beauty. Nestled halfway between the bustling metropolitan hubs of San Francisco and Los Angeles lies Paso Robles. The true name of the sanctuary is El Paso de Robles, which translates to the Pass of the Oaks. It is a region defined by its scenery, where golden hills are dotted with ancient oak trees, cattle graze in open pastures, and endless vineyards stretch toward the horizon. For many, it is a place of escape, a sanctuary where life moves at a deliberate, peaceful pace. Yet, down El Faro Road, in the midst of this natural elegance, a dark and unsettling event took place at a secluded vacation property known as Paradise Ranch. The owner of this ranch-style estate was 62-year-old Nancy Woodrum. Nancy was a beloved fixture in the Paso Robles community. She operated a popular downtown salon called The Strand, where she was known not just for her talents as a hairstylist, but for her extraordinary warmth, open nature, and generous spirit. She shared a deep bond with her daughter, Amanda, who worked alongside her. Nancy was also a woman of profound faith, living her life as a devout Jehovah's Witness, carrying a gentle hope for a peaceful world. Following the passing of her husband, Robert, Nancy had worked diligently to transform Paradise Ranch into a welcoming vacation rental. The property featured a beautiful 2-story Victorian home with wraparound porches, shaded by a grand willow tree. To help manage her expenses and transition into full-time missionary work, Nancy decided to put the property up for sale. To finalize the listing, she hired various local contractors, painters, and landscapers to perform routine maintenance. On Friday, the 4th of May, 2018, a wedding party consisting of over 20 guests checked into Paradise Ranch for a weekend celebration at a local winery. The main Victorian house was filled with laughter and preparation. The bride, staying in the adjacent guest cottage, met Nancy, who welcomed her with a warm embrace. It was a picture of happiness, but beneath the celebratory atmosphere, a predator was watching. The alarm was raised on Saturday, the 5th of May. Nancy failed to appear for a scheduled morning Bible study, an absence that was deeply uncharacteristic of her. Concerned, Amanda contacted a neighbor to check on her mother. When the neighbor arrived at Nancy's cottage, she found the front door wide open and the television blaring. Inside, Nancy was nowhere to be found. Amanda rushed to the property and was met with a chilling scene. Nancy's purse, car keys, cellular phone, and tablet were all sitting on a bench. Her 2 vehicles remained parked outside, but on the floor lay 2 large, dark stains. On the bed, a beige pillow was stained with blood, and blood spatter was visible on the headboard and the adjacent walls. The sheets and bedding had been stripped away. Realizing her mother had been taken against her will, Amanda dialed 911. The response from the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office was immediate. Senior deputies and detectives arrived to secure the area, transforming the scenic vacation home into a cordoned-off crime scene. Search and rescue teams, tracking dogs, and helicopters descended upon the foothills and the nearby dry riverbed. Among the responding officers was Clinton Cole, a senior deputy who felt an immediate personal connection to the case. Looking at the undisturbed valuables and the violent indicators in the bedroom, Detective Cole knew they were dealing with a kidnapping. The initial suspect pool was daunting. Over 20 wedding guests were residing on the property, having returned from a late rehearsal dinner. Investigators had to systematically interview every guest, establishing timelines and securing voluntary deoxyribonucleic acid samples. One guest who initially appeared defensive and reluctant to cooperate was thoroughly investigated, but was ultimately cleared when his wife produced photographs proving his presence at the rehearsal dinner. He, too, voluntarily provided a sample of his genetic material. As the search intensified, a critical discovery was made 6 miles away on La Ponza Road. An observant officer with the California Highway Patrol located a pile of discarded items on the shoulder of the road. Among the brush lay a blood-stained pillow, a gingham print sheet, a woman's dress, a pair of shorts, and a shirt. Amanda confirmed with a heavy heart that these items belonged to her mother. The evidence suggested Nancy had been wrapped in her own bedding and transported away, severely injured or deceased. Detectives began compiling a list of individuals who had recently accessed the property. Attention turned to Sean Bloom, a general contractor who had been fired by Nancy after a heated dispute over unfinished work. Bloom had sent threatening text messages demanding payment, providing a plausible motive of resentment. However, Bloom cooperated fully, sat for an interview, and voluntarily submitted his deoxyribonucleic acid, which did not match the evidence found at the scene. Investigators also looked closely at Nancy's estranged son, Chad.
The
relationship had been highly strained, with no face-to-face contact for 5 years. On the night of her disappearance, Nancy had sent him a final, conciliatory text message. Chad was deeply distrustful of law enforcement and refused to provide a genetic sample. Detectives placed him under surveillance, eventually retrieving discarded beer bottles after he was stopped for a minor traffic violation. The laboratory analysis cleared him entirely. With traditional leads exhausted, the investigation faced a critical impasse.
It
was then that the department decided to utilize a sophisticated and relatively novel investigative tool, Google geofencing, by securing a search warrant for a specific geographical boundary around Paradise Ranch during the precise window of Nancy's disappearance. Investigators sought to identify any cellular devices active on the property. A crucial anchor for this timeline was a failed 911 call.
telephone.
Records revealed that at 12:17 in the morning on May 5th, Nancy's phone had attempted to contact emergency services for a duration of 0 seconds, indicating the call was instantly disconnected. When Google returned the geofence data, detectives analyzed the active device identifiers. Amid the devices belonging to the wedding guests, they isolated a single, anomalous device that pinged inside Nancy's studio cottage at 1:33 and again at 1:52 in the morning. When they requested the subscriber information for that specific device, the name that returned was Carlo Fuentes Flores. Carlo was a local painter who had been hired to paint the decks of the main
house.
During his initial routine interview, he had been exceedingly cooperative, polite, and friendly, even recalling how Nancy had kindly given him a tamale for his hard work. He was a family man with a young daughter and possessed absolutely no prior criminal record. He seemed, by all accounts, to be an upstanding, hard-working member of the community. However, a deep dive into his digital footprint revealed a stark psychological duality. Behind the facade of the courteous painter lay a dark, secret life. Investigators discovered that Carlo's search history was filled with highly specific queries for adult videos involving older women, escorts, and numerous self-recorded files of a highly personal nature. Nancy Woodrum was 15 years older than Carlo, and detectives theorized that he had developed a dangerous obsession with her while working on the property. To secure an airtight case, investigators needed his physical deoxyribonucleic acid without alerting him to their suspicions. A surveillance detail followed Carlo to a local restaurant, where they retrieved a plastic beverage bottle he had discarded. The laboratory compared the genetic material from the bottle to a partial, bloody handprint found on the pillow in Nancy's room. It was a perfect
match.
On the 8th of November, 2018, Carlo was brought to the sheriff's station for interrogation. Detectives Cole and his partner systematically established his familiarity with the property. When confronted with the irrefutable genetic evidence, Carlo's composed demeanor shattered. He began to weep, confessing that he had made a terrible mistake. Initially, Carlo attempted to minimize his culpability, claiming he had returned to the property in the middle of the night to retrieve a ladder and had accidentally struck Nancy with his truck. He claimed he carried her inside to help her, but under relentless, methodical questioning, his narrative fell apart. He admitted that he had entered her home with the intent to assault her. He confessed to raping her and, to prevent her from identifying him, suffocating her with her own pillow. In an unexpected moment of contrition, Carlo offered to guide detectives to her remains. They drove an hour east toward the arid, desert landscape of the Carrizo Plain. After searching several locations, Carlo pointed to a small, unnatural mound of rocks. There, investigators recovered Nancy's remains, which had been left exposed to the elements. To avoid a lengthy, public trial that would distress both families, Carlo agreed to a slow plea. The judge reviewed the extensive evidence and found him guilty of first-degree murder with a special circumstance of rape. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Nancy Woodrum was a woman who survived great personal tragedies, including the loss of 2 children and her husband, yet she maintained a beautiful, generous heart. Today, her daughter Amanda rides her mother's horse, Montana, passing down that legacy of strength and love to her own daughter, ensuring that Nancy's light is never truly extinguished. Chapter 2: The Ghostwriter of Grief. In the majestic mountain community of Summit County, Utah, the winters are long, and the snow blankets grand, multi-million-dollar estates. It is an affluent region where success is measured in timber, stone, and expansive views. In this picturesque setting, Eric Richens built a highly successful masonry business, C&E Masonry, and lived with his wife, Corey, and their 3 young boys. To the outside world, the Richens family was the embodiment of the American dream. Eric was an avid outdoorsman, a dedicated youth soccer coach, and a devoted father. Corey was an ambitious real estate agent who specialized in purchasing distressed properties, renovating them, and flipping them for substantial profits. On the night of March 3rd, 2022, Corey claimed they were celebrating a monumental milestone. She had recently placed a contract on a massive, unfinished estate in Midway, Utah, valued at nearly $3 million. She prepared a celebration drink for Eric, a mixed cocktail, before retiring to bed. At approximately 3 o'clock in the morning on March 4th, Corey placed a frantic call to 911. She reported that her husband was cold to the touch and was not breathing. When paramedics and sheriff's deputies arrived, they found Eric lying on the floor of his bedroom. Despite their efforts, he was pronounced dead at the scene. The responding emergency medical technicians noted an unusual amount of blood near his mouth, sparking an initial, tentative theory of a sudden brain aneurysm. In the weeks and months that followed, Corey presented herself to the community as a shattered, grieving widow, she spoke publicly about the agonizing difficulty of explaining death to her 3 young sons. Finding a lack of literary resources to help children cope with sudden loss, Corrie decided to write her own book. She self-published a children's book titled Are You With Me? A touching story about a child wondering if his deceased father is still present in his life. The book was dedicated to her husband, featuring illustrations of their family. Corrie embarked on a promotional tour, appearing on local television and radio programs to discuss her journey through grief, receiving widespread admiration for her vulnerability and strength. But beneath this public display of maternal devotion lay a sinister reality. The medical examiner's toxicology report returned a devastating finding. Eric Richens had not died of an aneurysm. He had died from a massive overdose of illicitly manufactured fentanyl. The concentration of the drug in his system was more than 5 times the lethal limit, and it had been ingested orally. This revelation immediately transformed the sudden death into a homicide. Investigation. Investigators with the Summit County Sheriff's Office, alongside a private investigator hired by Eric's suspicious family, began a comprehensive review of Corrie's financial and personal life. What they uncovered was a mountain of debt and a history of systematic deception. Eric's family had long harbored deep reservations about Corrie. When they were married, Eric's mother had insisted on a prenuptial agreement protecting his masonry business. In 2020, Eric discovered that Corrie had secretly taken out a $250,000 line of credit against their family home, which he solely owned. She had forged his signature on the documents. Deeply alarmed by her financial recklessness, Eric secretly consulted a divorce attorney and established a new estate plan. He placed his assets and the family home into a private trust, naming his sister, Katie, as the executor and his 3 sons as the sole beneficiaries, effectively cutting Corrie out of his estate. Corrie's financial situation was desperate. She owed over $4,500,000 to more than 20 different lenders, utilizing high-interest, short-term hard money loans to fund her lavish real estate acquisitions, including the unfinished Midway Mansion. She mistakenly believed that upon Eric's death, she would inherit his multi-million-dollar estate and a massive life insurance payout, which would rescue her from financial ruin. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered a terrifying pattern of previous attempts on Eric's life. During a trip to Greece in 2019, Eric became violently ill after consuming a drink prepared by Corrie, prompting him to call his sister and voice his fear that his wife was trying to poison him. On Valentine's Day in 2022, just weeks before his death, Corrie purchased a breakfast bagel sandwich and left it for Eric with a loving note. After taking a single bite, Eric suffered a severe allergic reaction, requiring the use of his son's epinephrine auto-injector and heavy doses of antihistamines. He texted a friend later that day stating, "I think my wife tried to poison me." The digital forensic investigation proved to be the ultimate undoing of Corey's carefully constructed narrative. Investigators traced her communications to a woman named Carmen Lauber, a housekeeper who had worked for Corey's real estate business and possessed a history of drug-related offenses. When questioned by detectives, Carmen admitted that Corey had approached her on 2 separate occasions, requesting that she procure strong pain medication, specifically the Mexican stuff. Carmen admitted to purchasing fentanyl pills from a local dealer, Robert Crozier, and delivering them to Corey. The timing of these deliveries aligned perfectly with Eric's sudden illnesses, including the day before his fatal overdose. Furthermore, detectives uncovered that Corey was engaged in a secret, years-long affair with a handyman named Josh Grossman. Their text messages revealed a passionate, desperate relationship. Corey repeatedly expressed her desire to escape her marriage, promising Josh that life is going to be different. I promise, and asking him to hang in there until Friday, the very day Eric was found dead. Following her arrest on May 8, 2023, Corey was held without bail in the Summit County Jail. Even behind bars, her propensity for manipulation continued. During a routine search of her cell, deputies discovered a handwritten 4-page letter addressed to her mother. The letter, which began with the instruction to walk the dog, outlined an elaborate plan to have her brother, Ronnie, testify falsely that Eric had confessed to obtaining fentanyl from laborers on his ranch. The prosecution presented this letter as clear evidence of witness tampering, further cementing her consciousness of guilt. In the courtroom, during her highly publicized murder trial, the prosecution presented a mountain of circumstantial and direct evidence, including her internet searches. Following the execution of the initial search warrant, Corey had searched her phone for luxury prisons for the rich in America. Ken police recovered deleted messages on an iPhone and what is a lethal dose of fentanyl. In a dramatic turn, the defense team, realizing the strength of the state's case, rested their case without calling a single witness to the stand. The jury deliberated for just under 3 hours before returning a unanimous verdict of guilty on all counts, including aggravated murder and attempted murder. Corey Richens, the woman who sought to profit from her husband's death and build a public persona of maternal grace, was sentenced to life in prison. The 3 young boys, who lost their father to violence and their mother to greed, were adopted by Eric's sister, ensuring they would grow up surrounded by genuine love, security, and the enduring memory of their father's devotion. Chapter 3: The Deleted Call in the Driveway. In the city of Evansville, Indiana, the winters are biting and the community is tightly knit. Robert Dorr, known affectionately as Robbie, was a cornerstone of that community. For 28 years, Robbie served as a firefighter, a respected leader who trained rookies and ran into burning buildings to save lives. He was a true hero, recognized by everyone for his selflessness and his infectious laugh. To support his family and his children, Lindsay, Nathan, and Dustin, Robbie worked a second job as a manager at a local restaurant, Taco
John's.
It was there that he met Elizabeth Fox, a woman who had been married 5 times. Previously, Robbie fell deeply in love with her, and after a brief courtship, they were married on a beach in Florida. Elizabeth adopted the role of a dedicated, stay-at-home homemaker, while Robbie worked tirelessly, often putting in 12-hour shifts to provide the comfortable lifestyle she desired. But beneath the surface of this newly forged union, financial and emotional, tension began to grow. Elizabeth had accumulated significant debt, purchasing a new vehicle, furniture, and appliances immediately after their wedding. Robbie was forced to borrow heavily, maxing out his credit cards to keep up with the expenses. Robbie also began to harbor deep insecurities, noticing that Elizabeth was highly protective of her cellular phone, frequently deleting her text messages and call history. He confided in his children and his closest friends, expressing his fear that she was engaging in infidelity. On the cold evening of February 26, 2019, Robbie arrived home after completing a long shift at the fire department. As he pulled his truck into the driveway of their Oakley Street home, he was met with a barrage of gunfire. He was shot 5 times at close range. Elizabeth placed a call to 911, screaming that she had heard popping sounds while cooking dinner. Responding officers and firefighters, many of whom were Robbie's close friends, arrived to find the beloved firefighter lying on the concrete, unresponsive. He was pronounced dead shortly after. The loss sent shockwaves through the Evansville Fire Department, and his fellow firefighters escorted his body to the coroner's office in a solemn, silent procession of engine trucks. The initial investigation yielded very little physical evidence. No shell casings were recovered from the driveway, suggesting the shooter had used a revolver. However, during the autopsy, the forensic pathologist recovered a unique mixture of ammunition from Robbie's body, including jacketed projectiles, lead ball rounds, and plastic shotgun wadding. A ballistics expert recognized this combination immediately. The weapon used was a Taurus Judge, a massive revolver designed to fire both .45 caliber handgun rounds and .410 bore shotgun shells. It was a highly distinctive hand cannon, and it became the key focus of the investigation. Detectives began constructing a digital whiteboard, placing Robbie at the center, and mapping out his immediate family and associates. They quickly discovered that a Taurus Judge revolver had recently been reported stolen from a local pawn shop, River City Pawn. Upon investigation, they learned that Larry Richmond Jr., a young employee with no criminal record, had worked at the pawn shop during the time of the theft. Under questioning, Larry Jr. admitted that he had taken the weapon, but he revealed a far more significant detail. He had given the gun to his father, Larry Richmond Sr. Larry Richmond Sr. was a convicted murderer who had recently been released on probation after serving 20 years in prison. He was currently living with Elizabeth's sister, Mandy. Furthermore, a detailed analysis of Elizabeth's telephone records revealed a highly suspicious anomaly. In the minutes leading up to the shooting, there was a 4-minute and 18-second telephone call on her billing statement that had been manually deleted from her handset. The number she had been speaking with belonged to Larry Richmond Sr. When confronted by detectives, Elizabeth initially denied any knowledge of the call, claiming she deleted all of her call history out of habit. However, as investigators began to peel back the layers of deception, they uncovered a complex web of betrayal. Larry Richmond Jr. testified that he had witnessed his father and Elizabeth kissing behind Robbie's home, revealing a secret romantic affair. Larry Sr. was a manipulative predator who was engaging in relationships with multiple women simultaneously, including Elizabeth and her sister, Mandy. The digital forensic team worked for months to brute force the passcode on Larry Sr.'s iPhone. When they finally gained access, the global positioning system data painted a chilling picture of his movements on the night of the murder. Larry's phone was tracked slithering around the perimeter of Robbie's home in the hours leading up to the shooting. His device was positioned in the adjacent alleyway at the exact moment Robbie's truck pulled into the driveway. Immediately after the shots were fired, the phone was powered off, turning back on 15 minutes later at a nearby Circle K convenience store, where surveillance video showed Larry dressed in a sleeveless shirt despite the freezing winter temperatures. Further evidence of a conspiracy emerged from a handwritten note found in a condolence card delivered to Elizabeth's family. The note, written by Larry Sr. on a torn piece of paper, stated simply, "We need to talk," and included his private telephone number. Additionally, surveillance video from a neighbor's property captured Larry Sr. carrying a heavy plastic tote box into Mandy's backyard and burying it beneath a fire pit. When detectives excavated the yard, they recovered a hidden cache of firearms, though the murder weapon itself had been disposed of elsewhere. The final piece of the puzzle came from a jailhouse informant named Muhammad, who had shared a cell with Larry Sr. Muhammad testified that Larry had openly confessed to planning and executing the murder, stating that they needed to get rid of the firefighter so that Elizabeth could secure his substantial pension and life insurance benefits, which they would share. Elizabeth Fox Dorr and Larry Richmond Sr. were both arrested and charged with murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Elizabeth's defense team argued that the prosecution's case was based entirely on circumstantial evidence and a deleted phone call, but the jury was not swayed. After a dramatic trial, Elizabeth was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 90 years in prison. Larry Richmond Sr. was subsequently tried, found guilty of murder, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Robbie Dorr's memory is honored by the Evansville Fire Department, who dedicated their newest fire engine in his name, ensuring that his legacy of bravery and service continues to protect the city he loved. Chapter for the Mask of Deception. In the quiet, rural town of Willard, Ohio, life is centered around the railroad and the farmlands that surround it. Regina Rowe was a vibrant, independent young woman who loved country music, worked on mechanical engines, and took great pride in her white Camaro. In her youth, she married her high school boyfriend, Paul Hicks, and they had a young son named Montana. However, the marriage was defined by Paul's obsessive need for control. He systematically isolated Regina from her friends and family, and the relationship grew increasingly abusive. In the summer of 2001, a suspicious fire destroyed their family home. Paul had claimed he and Regina were away fishing at the time, and the fire was ruled accidental. They received a $60,000 insurance settlement. This financial injection gave Regina the means to seek independence. She filed for divorce, purchased her beloved Camaro, and began dating a new boyfriend, Mikey Perkins. She was finally smiling again, reclaiming her life. On the evening of October 18th, 2001, Regina was scheduled to pick up 4-year-old Montana from Paul, who was staying at the home of his lifelong best friend, Steve Gates. Regina never arrived. Her family immediately knew something was terribly wrong, as she would never have abandoned her young son. 4 days later, a local farmer noticed an unusual object submerged in a pond on his property. Emergency personnel responded and recovered a white Camaro from the water. Regina's body was found in the passenger seat, her feet tucked beneath the dashboard. The driver's side seat was pushed back, indicating a much larger person had been driving, and the driver's window was rolled down. The autopsy revealed that Regina had suffered 3 blunt force blows to her scalp, which were sufficient to stun or incapacitate her, but not kill her. She had died of freshwater drowning, meaning she was still breathing when the vehicle was submerged in the pond. Her clothing and boots were caked in thick mud, despite their deep suspicions. Investigators lacked the physical evidence, DNA or fingerprints, to link Paul to the crime. Paul maintained that Regina had simply run off to party, and the case grew cold, remaining unsolved for over a decade. 14 years later, in June of 2015, a massive structure fire consumed an investment property owned by Paul Hicks in Goshen, Ohio. Paul immediately contacted investigators, claiming his ex-girlfriend, Kelly, was responsible. He produced high-definition surveillance footage from his home security system, which had survived the fire inside a heavy gun safe. The footage depicted a woman with long, curly blonde hair and facial features remarkably similar to Kelly's, pouring gasoline throughout the home. Paul also produced telephone logs showing that Kelly had called his phone over 90 times on the night of the fire, and he reminded police that Kelly had previously been suspected of vandalizing his hot tub, an incident that had also been caught on his security cameras, featuring the same distinctive blonde hair. Kelly was arrested and maintained her absolute innocence. Zach McCune, an attorney representing Allstate Insurance, began a meticulous investigation into the civil claim filed by Paul. McCune quickly discovered a series of fatal flaws in Paul's elaborate narrative. First, cell phone carrier records revealed that Kelly's phone had not made the 90 calls to Paul. Instead, a digital spoofing application had been used to manipulate the caller identification traced back to an internet protocol address associated with Paul's own devices. The most shocking discovery came from a subpoena issued to a custom fabrication website called That's My Face. The records revealed that a purchase had been made using a credit card linked to Paul for a highly detailed, three-dimensional latex mask manufactured from photographs of Kelly's face. Paul had also purchased a high-quality blonde wig. He had hired an accomplice to wear the mask and wig, deliberately posing under his security cameras to frame his ex-girlfriend and collect a massive insurance payout. Confronted with this evidence of extraordinary sociopathic planning, the insurance company denied his claim, and Allstate secured a $400,000 fraud judgment against him. Criminal investigators subsequently charged Paul with insurance fraud, and he was sentenced to probation. But the exposure of Paul's manipulative genius caught the attention of the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, who realized that the psychological pattern of framing an ex-partner to avoid financial obligations aligned perfectly with the cold case of Regina's murder. Furthermore, local podcaster Ashley Ford began a series of investigative broadcasts, bringing widespread public attention to the cold case and placing immense pressure on the individuals who had protected Paul for decades. The breakthrough came when investigators re-interviewed Steve Gates, Paul's best friend, offered immunity from prosecution for his prior false statements. Gates broke down and confessed to the events of October 18, 2001. Gates admitted that Regina had indeed arrived at his property to pick up her son. An argument ensued in the driveway, and Paul assaulted Regina, knocking her unconscious. Paul then placed her limp body into the passenger seat of her Camaro. He instructed Gates to follow him in a second vehicle. Paul drove Regina's Camaro to the remote pond, drove the vehicle into the deep water, and escaped through the open driver's window, leaving his unconscious wife to drown. On the drive back, Paul used his cellular phone to call Regina's pager, creating a false digital alibi to suggest he was still waiting for her to arrive. On April 22, 2025, Paul Hicks was indicted and arrested for the murder and kidnapping of Regina Roe Hicks. During his trial, the prosecution presented Steve Gates' devastating eyewitness testimony, alongside the evidence of Paul's elaborate arson scheme, demonstrating a lifetime pattern of extreme deceit and control. After a brief deliberation of under 3 hours, the jury found Paul Hicks guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison. Regina's family, who had fought for justice for 24 years, finally received the closure they had long been denied, though her son, Montana, had to endure the painful truth of his father's actions. The community gathered to honor Regina's memory, ensuring she would be remembered not as a victim of a Monstrous plot, but as a loving mother whose light could not be dimmed by the dark machinations of her killer. Conclusion: the triumph of truth. In analyzing these 4 cases, a profound psychological truth emerges. The criminal who believes they have designed the perfect crime is ultimately defeated by their own arrogance. Whether it is Carlo Fuentes Flores, relying on his reputation as a gentle painter while leaving his digital footprint inside a victim's cottage, Corey Richens, writing a book on grief while standing on a foundation of poison and debt, Elizabeth Fox Dorr, believing that deleting a single call could erase her connection to an ambush, or Paul Hicks ordering a custom 3-dimensional latex mask to frame an innocent woman. All of them fell victim to the illusion of their own superiority. The law enforcement officers, forensic scientists, digital analysts, and community members who solved these cases did not rely on flashy drama. They relied on patience, meticulous science, and an unshakable belief that every human life has value. In the end, the Pass of the Oaks remains peaceful. The mountains of Utah continue to shine. The streets of Evansville are guarded by dedicated heroes. And the farmlands of Ohio remember a young mother who loved the open road. Good has triumphed over evil, proving that no matter how complex the cover-up, the truth remains an unyielding, eternal force. The Architecture of Deception, a study of criminal psychology, forensic progress, and the persistence of justice. Introduction: The Mask of Normalcy. The human mind possesses an extraordinary capacity for compartmentalization, to walk among one's neighbors, to exchange pleasantries at a local market, to paint a fence, or to write a book on grief, while harboring the darkest of secrets, requires a specific psychological architecture. This is the study of 4 distinct criminal investigations that spanned decades, crossed geographical boundaries, and challenged the limits of traditional police work. It is an exploration of how modern technology, coupled with the relentless dedication of law enforcement and the communities they serve, systematically dismantled the masks of normalcy worn by individuals who believed they were clever enough to outrun the truth. In analyzing these cases, we do not merely look at the mechanics of the crimes. We examine the psychological fissures that led to their undoing, the hubris of the perpetrator, the silent digital footprints left behind in an interconnected world, and the ultimate triumph of logical, scientific deduction over elaborate deception. Most importantly, we honor the memory of the victims whose lives were cut short by greed, obsession, and violence, but whose voices were ultimately heard through the quiet, meticulous gathering of evidence. Section 1. The Silent Cottage in the Valley of the Oaks. The central coast of California is defined by its sweeping vistas, where rolling hills are dotted with ancient trees and vineyards stretched toward the horizon. In this tranquil landscape sits Paso Robles, a town known historically as the Pass of the Oaks. It is a place where community ties are strong and life moves at a deliberate, peaceful pace. Yet, in May of 2018, this serenity was shattered by a disappearance that transformed a scenic vacation ranch into a complex crime scene. Nancy Woodrum was 62 years old, a beloved fixture in the Paso Robles
community.
She operated a popular hair salon downtown called The Strand, where she was known for her warmth, her generous spirit, and her open heart to those who knew her. Nancy was a woman of deep faith and quiet strength.
She was a
devout Jehovah's Witness who spent her free time sharing her spiritual hope with others. Following the passing of her husband several years prior, she lived alone in a modest, ranch-style cottage on a secluded property down El Faro Road. This property, which she and her late husband had lovingly remodeled, was known as Paradise Ranch. To accommodate visitors drawn to the local wineries, she had converted the main two-story Victorian home on the estate into a vacation rental, while she resided in the nearby guest cottage. On Friday,